Colleagues, please be seated. We're going to start. Ahmed and colleagues, if you just could take your slots, as they call it. We're going to start in 4 minutes. Claude, ça fait penser tout le temps à cette petite chanson de ma cadette. Elle chantait toujours quand elle avait 3-4 ans, tous les matins avec les copains. Ah. Okay, dear colleagues, please take your places. We're going to start. I hope that some other of our colleagues of the ALDE group are going to come in here. Okay, we'll have to start. Voila. Good morning, dear colleagues. Please take your seats. Welcome my good colleague and friend, President of the European Parliament, David Sassoli. We're very glad to have you on board. Our members are trickling in because, as you know, they had their group meetings, so I'm like ringing my bell to get them in. Anyway, they are almost all coming down. As a matter of fact, just for your information, we have our second session in a hybrid manner. Basically, it's a physical meeting, but those who cannot be with us are online. Just for your information, we have more than 100 members of parliament coming down to Strasbourg out of more than 20 countries. And if I'm correct, we got about 150 online. So there's a big audience for you, Mr. President, which is normal because we are related institutions, the European Parliament and ourselves. We did have an occasion to meet briefly. It was kind of a speed date at the beginning of last year, and we did convene that we would meet a bit regularly, but COVID decided differently. As you know, we have a cooperation agreement that we would like to put in practice, where committees meet, where our bureaus meet. But as I said, the COVID decided else. Some mean differently, and I suppose it converted you as well as myself in some kind of a crisis manager trying to adapt and overcome. I know that you did in a very nice and good way with your parliament, of course with the support of all of your services, and I can tell you that we, from our side, did the same with the support of all of our services. And again, this is our second meeting that we are having in a, well, so-called hybrid fashion, as you do with your parliament in Brussels. Now, anyway, if for any reason you might consider coming down to Strasbourg, be it yourself or be it the whole of a part of your parliament. I mean, my Secretary General, our new Secretary General Despina, is fully available to share expertise. And I'm sure that the French authorities, I don't know, Marie Fontanelle, there she is, from whom we had fantastic cooperation, will do the same. We got almost like a fixed building outside the parliament for all the testing. It's incredible. Anyway, we cross our fingers, we touch on wood that everything continues to go well, but I'm sure that whatever you consider to come down to Strasbourg, that our expertise might be valuable. The issues, obviously, that you will touch upon, I suppose, will be the accession of the European Union to the European Convention of Human Rights. Maybe remind our colleagues that this is something that is not to be decided upon, because it has been decided in the Lisbon Treaty. Now, the Lisbon Treaty is already, I think it is already valid since December 2009, if I'm not mistaken, so that's like 12 years ago. Anyway, needless to say that maybe it is time to do so, and I don't think there's any problem between your parliament and ours in order to have the elements in place. I know there's no problem, but I suppose there's still a little bit of a fuss going on between courts, maybe, in order to decide on some details, and hopefully they can do so quickly. May I also permit myself to congratulate you with this initiative of the Conference on the Future of Europe. And you also have an online platform created for citizens, and as I read, also for parliaments. So, Mr. President, dear David, I permitted myself to go on your online platform. And luckily, yesterday we had a big debate in our parliament concerning the strategic priorities of the Council of Europe. Our Secretary General has made a big document on it saying, okay, where do we go? Where do we put our priorities in the coming years? And as an assembly, we contributed to that with our own report, namely a report on strategic priorities of the Council of Europe in the coming years. I took word with its rapporteur, Tine Cox. Of course, I took word with our Secretary General, and I took the liberty, Mr. President, on your online platform to post it. Now, to be sure that you got it, I also sent it to you by mail, and so you may consider it as a humble first contribution of our Assembly to this formidable exercise you're heading into, and you may consider it being a contribution of over 600 members of parliament out of 47 countries in Europe. Needless to say that as far as we are concerned within the context of the European Convention of Human Rights and the values that we share, that we do believe that an exercise on Europe involves the whole Europe. We call it the Greater Europe, and I do hope that to the extent of the appropriate, but of course this is for you to decide, we are available to contribute even more. But again, I permitted myself, I took the liberty, as they say in nice English, to already go on your platform personally, and on behalf of the Assembly, I posted the document that we, by the way, adopted yesterday by unanimity -1 vote. We always need one negative vote, you know, otherwise it's a bit too obvious. But you know that, you're the President of a Parliament. And so I took the liberty of posting this as a contribution to the formidable task you got ahead of you. And as I understand, you will be starting that conference on the 9th of May, which is in about 2 weeks. So I suppose everyone is getting a little bit nervous. And once again, might you consider coming down here? I can tell you I'll be here and I'll cross the passerelle. Just for our colleagues to know, we got a passerelle between our two parliaments, and so we might build a bridge between the two of us. Without any due delay, I am extremely happy to have you on board, Mr. Sassoli, and we will hear your address, after which obviously you will have some questions of members of our parliament, and as we always say in the parliament, those who put a question are the owner of their question, but you obviously are the owner of your answer. Having said this, without any further delay, dear President, dear friend, dear colleague, dear colleagues, please now, may I have your attention for the address by the President of the European Parliament, David Sassoli. You have the floor.
Grazie, grazie signor Presidente Dams, grazie per le sue gentili parole. Onorevoli membri dell'Assemblea parlamentare del Consiglio d'Europa, signore e signori, è per me un grande onore intervenire oggi dinanzi alla sessione plenaria della vostra Assemblea. Sarei stato lieto anch'io di poter essere con voi di persona a Strasburgo, e anche il Parlamento europeo spera di tornare presto alle proprie attività consuete e al ritorno a Strasburgo in tempi rapidi, perché Strasburgo incarna bene alla perfezione la storia europea, e questo è scritto nel nostro DNA comune. Perché dico DNA? Perché tengo a ricordare che tra qualche giorno celebreremo l'anniversario della firma di un testo che ha cambiato il corso della storia del nostro continente, ed è lo Statuto del Consiglio d'Europa. Era il 1949, a pochi anni dalla fine della Seconda Guerra Mondiale, che causò perdite incommensurabili, lasciando l'Europa in uno stato di desolazione. Sulle ceneri di quel conflitto alcuni grandi leader lungimiranti hanno avuto il coraggio di costruire le fondamenta del nostro edificio, le fondamenta dell'Europa moderna. Lo scopo del Consiglio d'Europa, recita lo Statuto, è di realizzare una più ampia unità tra i suoi membri, al fine di salvaguardare e di realizzare i ideali e principi comuni, consolidare naturalmente la pace. Sono proprio questi i germi dell'integrazione europea, per la quale lavoriamo assieme già da 72 anni, un'epoca che non è lunghissima, ma è molto lunga per i tempi e i ritmi della storia europea. Si trattò di un momento storico, di un vero punto di svolta per l'Europa. È stato il Consiglio d'Europa a incarnare per la prima volta la comunità di valori che dà forma al nostro continente, allo spazio europeo come lo conosciamo oggi. La libertà individuale, la libertà politica, il rispetto dello Stato di diritto, la democrazia, i diritti umani, sono questi i valori che costituiscono la nostra identità, ed è proprio sulla base di questi principi che sono state fondate le nostre istituzioni aperte, che vogliono rafforzarsi, ammodernarsi, e attraverso la Convenzione dei diritti dell'uomo questi valori si sono tradotti in diritti per tutti i cittadini, sul cui rispetto vigila la Corte europea dei diritti dell'uomo. Diritti che anche voi difendete in seno alla assemblea parlamentare del Consiglio d'Europa e la vostra assemblea, che dà voce al continente europeo, rappresenta oggigiorno 820 milioni di cittadine e di cittadini. Essa ha spianato la strada al parlamentarismo transnazionale ed è stata fonte di ispirazione anche per noi, qui al Parlamento europeo. Analogamente, gli enormi progressi compiuti dal Consiglio d'Europa costituiscono dei punti cardine per l'istituzione che ho l'onore di presiedere. Mi riferisco in particolare all'abolizione quasi totale della pena di morte nel continente europeo o ancora allo sviluppo di strumenti che ci consentono di tutelare i diritti dei minori, delle donne, delle persone più vulnerabili. Un altro esempio significativo è il costante sostegno fornito al processo di democratizzazione dei paesi dell'Europa centrale e orientale a partire dal 1989. Nel corso degli anni il Consiglio d'Europa ha creato standard in materia di diritti umani, di democrazia, con i quali ci misuriamo quotidianamente, che guidano il nostro lavoro ogni giorno. Signore e signori, ci troviamo oggi nel mezzo di una crisi di vasta portata, quella della pandemia Covid-19. Edgar Morin, un maestro, in un recente dibattito sul mondo post-pandemia che ho organizzato qui al Parlamento europeo, ha qualificato questa crisi come totale. E penso che avesse ragione, perché la pandemia ha sconvolto ogni aspetto della nostra vita, la salute, le relazioni con gli altri, il lavoro, l'istruzione, l'economia. Ha messo in luce le nostre debolezze e ha messo a nudo le disuguaglianze troppo grandi che attraversano le nostre società. Tuttavia, paradossalmente, la pandemia ci ha anche ricordato fino a che punto tutti noi siamo interdipendenti gli uni dagli altri, ed esiste un unico modo per uscire da una crisi di così grande portata, quella della solidarietà all'interno dell'Europa e con il resto del mondo, per prevenire crisi future, migliorare le nostre risposte. Il mondo di domani dovrà più che mai essere strutturato intorno alla cooperazione, al multilateralismo e alla solidarietà. La risposta che abbiamo dato alla pandemia a livello di Parlamento europeo, a livello di Unione europea, ha dimostrato ancora una volta la pertinenza di una vecchia osservazione formulata da uno dei nostri padri fondatori, Jean Monnet, ossia che l'Europa si costruisce attraverso le crisi che essa affronta. Dinanzi alla situazione sanitaria senza precedenti abbiamo adottato politiche che solo qualche mese prima sarebbero state impensabili. Attraverso la negoziazione e l'adozione dello strumento per la ripresa economica e del quadro finanziario pluriannuale abbiamo proposto un modello di sviluppo sostenibile per l'Unione Europea, incentrato sulla giustizia sociale e sulla giustizia ambientale. Abbiamo altresì compiuto un passo in avanti che definirei anche storico, per quanto riguarda il rispetto dei valori che definiscono l'identità dell'Europa. Ormai il finanziamento a carico del bilancio europeo non è più senza condizioni. Come richiesto da tempo dal Parlamento europeo, il bilancio è legato al rispetto dello Stato di diritto, che è il fulcro di qualsiasi sistema democratico. Questo modello è originale, è il nostro modello, non ha uguali nel resto del mondo e di questo noi dobbiamo essere molto fieri. Come avete giustamente affermato in una risoluzione approvata nell'ottobre del 2020, la pandemia ha rappresentato anche una prova di resistenza delle istituzioni a livello nazionale e internazionale. Questa prova ci ha mostrato fino a che punto la solidarietà europea è necessaria per poter rispondere efficacemente a una crisi di questa portata. È ormai chiaro che dobbiamo dotare l'Unione Europea di strumenti nuovi, adeguarne le competenze, trasferirne poteri per poter affrontare più efficacemente e rapidamente le sfide che ci troviamo di fronte. In questo contesto ed è in questo contesto che avvieremo il 9 maggio prossimo la conferenza sul futuro dell'Europa a cui faceva riferimento il Presidente Dams. Il nostro obiettivo è di offrire un momento di riflessione sugli insegnamenti della crisi, nonché su come rafforzare, aggiornare la democrazia europea. Qual è il tempo migliore per farlo? Beh, questo. Non ce n'è un altro. E dopo il Covid sarebbe troppo tardi. Ecco perché è molto importante che questa riflessione su noi stessi, sull'efficienza e l'efficacia e l'ammodernamento della democrazia europea avvenga in questo momento. Abbiamo bisogno di un'Unione Europea più efficiente, più flessibile, più resistente e anche più democratica. La conferenza sarà un evento senza precedenti che offrirà a tutti i cittadini europei, alle nostre opinioni pubbliche, ai nostri giovani, alle organizzazioni del mondo del lavoro e dell'impresa e alle nostre istituzioni nazionali di plasmare il futuro, il loro futuro. Anche i parlamenti nazionali e regionali, così come la società civile, gli attori locali, i ricercatori, le nostre università, svolgeranno un ruolo importante in questo dibattito. Parallelamente il Parlamento europeo trarrà anche insegnamenti dalla crisi che stiamo attraversando. Per mantenere viva la fiamma della democrazia siamo stati costretti a cambiare il nostro modo di lavorare di fronte alla pandemia. Questo ha avuto un riflesso in tutte le nostre istituzioni. Per continuare a discutere e a legiferare ci siamo dovuti adattare e rinnovare. E ora è giunto anche il momento di riflettere in modo più ampio sul funzionamento della nostra Assemblea parlamentare, per garantire che essa incarni l'ideale democratico che vogliamo rappresentare. L'apertura di tanti settori di riflessione in seno al Parlamento europeo e più in generale nell'Unione Europea parte da una constatazione molto semplice. Il mondo di ieri, quello in cui abbiamo vissuto prima della pandemia, non tornerà più. Ed è nostro dovere oggi immaginare e costruire un mondo migliore, più giusto, più equo, più rispettoso dell'ambiente. Dobbiamo costruire il mondo di domani, lasciare in eredità alle nostre giovani generazioni un patrimonio di valori che sappia dialogare con il mondo della contemporaneità. Il rispetto che sappia difendere il rispetto dei diritti umani, la dignità della persona, la libertà. Noi dobbiamo guidare questo processo e mi preoccupa in modo particolare il fatto che i nostri valori siano messi alla prova oggi, più che mai, in tutto il resto del mondo. La libertà è in declino a livello mondiale. Meno della metà della popolazione mondiale vive in un sistema democratico. Soltanto 80 dei 197 paesi riconosciuti hanno un sistema democratico. La disinformazione sta guadagnando terreno. Il populismo, il nazionalismo, la xenofobia e l'autoritarismo sono ideologie che trovano grande seguito in larghi settori della popolazione mondiale. La pandemia è servita a loro come giustificazione per indebolire lo Stato di diritto e la democrazia e rafforzare tendenze autoritarie. Questo è il mondo in cui l'Unione Europea si trova a vivere oggi. Siamo onesti, questi valori tanto cari all'Europa non sono indistruttibili. Ed è per questo che la loro difesa richiede tutta la nostra energia e la nostra determinazione. Il ritiro della Turchia dalla Convenzione di Istanbul dimostra chiaramente che assistiamo a un regresso per quanto riguarda il rispetto dei diritti umani, dei principi democratici. Le donne hanno sofferto in modo sproporzionato delle conseguenze della pandemia e di un aumento della violenza nei loro confronti. E questa decisione, la decisione delle autorità della Turchia, infligge un duro colpo ai progressi compiuti in questo campo. Il Parlamento europeo continuerà a essere vigile, a militare per un capovolgimento della decisione relativa al recesso della Turchia dalla Convenzione di Istanbul. E inoltre, come abbiamo sempre fatto, chiederemo che tutti gli Stati membri dell'Unione Europea ratifichino subito, rapidamente questa Convenzione e che l'Unione Europea aderisca a quest'ultima. E continueremo anche a insistere sull'applicazione delle sentenze della Convenzione europea dei diritti dell'uomo riguardanti la Turchia, che è membro del Consiglio d'Europa da oltre 70 anni. Questo pomeriggio, cari colleghi, discuterete della situazione in Bielorussia, un argomento che è al centro dell'attenzione, come sapete, delle nostre istituzioni e naturalmente da tempo del Parlamento europeo. Nel dicembre dello scorso anno ho avuto l'onore di consegnare il premio Sakharov per la libertà di pensiero all'opposizione democratica in Bielorussia. La determinazione e il coraggio di quei cittadini in quel paese sono una lezione di libertà e abbiamo l'obbligo di sostenere le loro richieste legittime e di denunciare con tutte le nostre forze le innumerevoli violazioni dei diritti umani perpetrate dal regime della Bielorussia. Ed è per questo motivo che il mese scorso il Parlamento europeo ha varato una piattaforma per la lotta all'impunità in Bielorussia. I crimini e le violazioni dei diritti umani che sono stati commessi devono essere puniti. E vi invito a collaborare con noi per garantire che ciò avvenga. Domani discuterete anche con procedura d'urgenza dell'arresto e della detenzione di Alexei Navalny. Sono molto preoccupato, siamo tutti molto preoccupati riguardo alla sua salute, alle sue condizioni di carcerazione. Penso che dovremo unire le nostre forze per assicurarci che le autorità russe forniscano ad Alexei urgentemente tutta l'assistenza medica di cui ha bisogno. Il Parlamento europeo continuerà a chiedere il suo rilascio immediato e incondizionato e a fare tutto il necessario per arrivare a questo fine. 76 anni fa, dopo la fine della Seconda Guerra Mondiale, la pace ancora non regnava nel nostro continente. Lo scorso anno 2 paesi partner dell'Unione Europea, 2 paesi membri del Consiglio d'Europa, si sono affrontati in una guerra che ha causato la perdita di numerose vite, ha provocato indicibili sofferenze nelle popolazioni. Ha ricordato che nessun conflitto è mai congelato per sempre. Per questo motivo è necessario intensificare gli sforzi dedicati al sostegno della pace nel continente europeo. E in questo contesto sono particolarmente preoccupato dello spiegamento delle truppe russe lungo le frontiere ucraine e nel territorio illegalmente annesso alla Crimea. È essenziale un allentamento delle tensioni ed è fondamentale che la Russia compia un passo indietro e rispetti i suoi impegni internazionali. Per il Parlamento europeo, il Consiglio d'Europa e la vostra Assemblea parlamentare sono degli alleati naturali e insieme dobbiamo sostenerci a vicenda nelle nostre iniziative per la promozione dei diritti umani e per lo sviluppo e il consolidamento della pace. Dai Balcani occidentali alla Moldova, di cui avete avuto il piacere di ascoltare la nuova presidente Maia Sandu durante la sessione di lunedì, dalla Georgia all'Ucraina, desidero che la nostra cooperazione, già estremamente significativa, si rafforzi ulteriormente. L'impatto dell'intelligenza artificiale sui diritti umani è un altro ambito di cui dovremo senza dubbio collaborare più strettamente. Una riflessione comune su questo tema potrebbe aiutarci a trovare il giusto equilibrio tra la tutela dei diritti dei cittadini e il sostegno allo sviluppo tecnologico. Le vostre competenze, conoscenze ed esperienze sono molto preziose per il Parlamento e i pareri e le relazioni del Consiglio d'Europa sono stati dei punti di riferimento fondamentali nei procedimenti a norma dell'articolo 7 riguardanti l'Ungheria e la Polonia. Le vostre risoluzioni e posizioni hanno spesso hanno consentito di essere dei riferimenti ai testi adottati dalla vostra Assemblea, così come ai pareri e alle relazioni della Commissione di Venezia, alle decisioni della Corte europea dei diritti dell'uomo. Anche le nostre missioni congiunte di osservazione elettorale ci hanno offerto molte possibilità di collaborazione e l'opportunità, naturalmente, di lavorare insieme. Dovremo però spingerci oltre. Non dobbiamo fermarci e non dobbiamo avere tabù. Lavoriamo insieme da commissione parlamentare a commissione parlamentare negli ambiti in cui si riscontra un valore aggiunto. Lavoriamo congiuntamente all'interno delle famiglie politiche e naturalmente rafforziamo ancora di più la cooperazione tra le nostre due amministrazioni. Attendo con interesse il giorno in cui i legami tra le nostre istituzioni saranno ulteriormente rinsaldati dall'adesione dell'Unione Europea alla Convenzione Europea dei diritti dell'uomo. La ripresa dei negoziati di adesione dimostra la nostra determinazione a conseguire tale obiettivo, di cui il Parlamento europeo è stato un attore attivo e un promotore. Signore e signori, ho cominciato il mio discorso con un riferimento alla storia del secolo scorso, che ha creato le condizioni per permettere la nascita di istituzioni democratiche, innovative e anche rivoluzionarie, come il Consiglio d'Europa e come l'Unione Europea. Ormai il XX secolo fa parte della storia. Abbiamo di fronte a noi delle nuove sfide. Dinanzi a queste nuove sfide, le nostre due assemblee dovrebbero intensificare congiuntamente i propri sforzi per rispondere a tutte le situazioni in cui all'interno del continente europeo, i progressi compiuti in materia di diritti umani e democrazia vengono rimessi in discussione. Vi ringrazio per questa opportunità e sono qui ad ascoltare anche le vostre domande. Naturalmente vi auguro buon lavoro. Grazie.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for these inspiring words. I'm not going to linger long on them, although I could, just reminding that, as you say, we are natural partners and we should join forces. So, and since I'm Belgian, I'm not so far away from Brussels, you know, so who knows, I'll pop in and put some of your intentions into practice, which I would really welcome on behalf of the Parliamentary Assembly. Let's head into the questions, because otherwise I'll be under fire of my colleagues down here. Our habit is the following, Mr. President. We have one speaker per political group in the beginning. After each question, of course, you are master of your answer. After these 5 first questions, we head into 5 questions together, and we see, in function of the time you have available, how far it brings us. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, this house can stay open until 9 at night, but I don't suppose you've got so much time. But they have got so much questions, I can tell you. Let's head into it. We have our first speaker. We have our first question on behalf of the group of Socialists, Greens and Democrats, which is Titus Corlatean from Romania. Titus, you are in the room, I suppose. You have the floor. 1 minute.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. President, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe and also the Socialist Group, we are valuing very much the strategic partnership functioning between the Council of Europe and the European Union. And currently, as you know, we are working hard to deepen our strategic partnership, taking into account on one side the historical role and competencies of the Council of Europe in the domains of human rights, democracy and rule of law and human rights, and on the other side, the new EU rule of law mechanism and the other standards. Key goal, EU accession to the European Convention of Human Rights. We should support strongly, from a political point of view, the process of negotiation that was relaunched last year. Possible cooperation on some other fields, conventions, social rights, European Social Charter, how to value the expertise of bodies like the Venice Commission, Greco, ECRI, Manival, and some others, deepening the ties between the European Parliament and Parliamentary Assembly, and last but not least, valuable contribution of the Council of Europe and PASE to the Conference on the Future of Europe. May I ask you to comment supplementary on these important priorities, opportunities, but also challenges, trying to avoid unnecessary duplication and competition. Thank you very much.
Titus. May I ask to the following questions to stay within your 1 minute? I know this is a unique opportunity. Mr. President, you have the floor. As concise as you can be, will allow more colleagues to have a question. You have the floor.
Sì, questo è il campo fondamentale per rafforzare la nostra collaborazione. Voi sapete quanto il Parlamento europeo sia attento alla difesa dello Stato di diritto e i risultati che sono stati ottenuti con l'ultima negoziazione sullo Stato di diritto e sulle condizionalità dello Stato di diritto dimostrano che nulla è tabù, che possiamo migliorare le nostre performance, che possiamo in qualche modo essere un'Unione Europea che si presenta sulla scena globale con una forte carta d'identità. Ecco perché io credo che in questo momento tutta la collaborazione tra noi sia possibile, nulla può essere escluso e naturalmente nei rispettivi ambiti. Noi siamo un'assemblea legislativa, abbiamo delle priorità che riguardano il funzionamento del Parlamento, ma nello stesso tempo tutto il grado di collaborazione che noi possiamo ottenere in questo momento non deve essere escluso. Ecco perché credo che in questo momento in particolare, soprattutto avendo a disposizione un'assemblea come quella, un'iniziativa come quella della conferenza sul futuro dell'Europa, questi temi debbano essere al centro della nostra attenzione. Nulla può essere escluso, nulla è tabù e dobbiamo naturalmente migliorare tutte le nostre efficienze e le nostre performance.
Thank you, President. I can assure you that in this House there aren't any taboos, as you say. We go to our second question. Alexander, on behalf of EPP, you have 1 minute. Alexander, in the room.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur le Président, au nom du groupe PPE, je vous remercie pour votre présentation très directe et très ferme. Vous n'êtes pas caché derrière langage diplomatique qui surtout, de temps en temps, ne vaut rien dire. C'est vrai, la démocratie, l'état de droit et les droits de l'homme sont des valeurs fondamentales qui sont l'essence même du projet européen. Même si le Conseil d'Europe a acquis dans ce domaine une expérience et une expertise reconnues avec le mécanisme de la Convention européenne des droits de l'homme, nous avons besoin de l'Union européenne à nos côtés. Je me félicite à cet égard de la volonté de la présidente de la Commission européenne de mettre en place un nouveau mécanisme européen de protection de l'état de droit. Je souhaiterais à cet égard vous interroger sur l'articulation entre l'action de l'Union européenne et du rôle du Conseil de l'Europe. Je pense notamment à l'adhésion de l'Union européenne à la Convention européenne des droits de l'homme ou encore au dialogue entre les juges de Strasbourg et du Luxembourg. Merci beaucoup.
Merci Alexandre. Vous avez la parole, Monsieur le Président.
Sì, grazie per questa domanda, perché il Parlamento europeo è un grande sostenitore di questa adesione e sono soddisfatto dell'adesione di un nuovo mandato negoziale dell'Unione europea nell'ottobre del 2019 che ha sbloccato il processo di adesione. L'adesione dell'Unione alla Convenzione europea dei diritti dell'uomo rafforzerà certamente la protezione dei diritti fondamentali in Europa ed è per noi una priorità e questo lo abbiamo sottolineato più volte. Il Parlamento dovrà anche dare il suo consenso all'accordo di adesione e ha seguito da vicino la prima fase dei negoziati fino al 2013, ha collaborato con la pace a questo proposito. Forme simili di cooperazione tra due organi parlamentari sarebbero anche utili per gli attuali negoziati e credo che su tutto questo avrete al vostro fianco il Parlamento europeo.
Thank you. We now move to our next question on behalf of the ALDE Group, Fiona O'Loughlin from Ireland, remotely. Fiona, you have the floor. 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, and greetings from Dublin President Sassoli. It's very good to see you and to listen to your very valued engagement. You have said that we cannot return to the world before the pandemic, that we need more democracy and that we need more solidarity. Can I assure you that we are ready and willing to work with you in the pursuit of that in a very positive way? Thank you for addressing the issue in relation to Turkey withdrawing from the Istanbul Convention. It's very, very important. But also just to share your concerns in relation to the erosion of human rights of the LGBTI community in Hungary and Poland. And we do need to do more. So do you think that that possibly will be done through funding cuts, or how do you propose the Parliament will deal with it? I'd also like to ask you about how you think we can balance fundamental freedoms with the introduction of the COVID passport and how we can deal with travel in and out of the EU. Mr. President, a lot of excellent work has been done by the Council of Europe, and we want to explore better synergies between ourselves and the Parliament in terms of the important issues that we take. I wish you well with your conference on the 9th of May. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Grazie onorevole. Penso che ci sia nella sua domanda alcune risposte che ho cercato di dare anche nel mio discorso, per cui non vorrei ripetermi. Noi abbiamo bisogno di rafforzare la nostra identità e quello che è successo alla fine dell'anno è davvero importante, è straordinario. è la prima volta che istituzioni sovranazionali pongono dei paletti molto forti al rispetto all'interno del proprio spazio geografico e politico alla difesa dello Stato di diritto. Non è mai successo e non era mai successo da nessuna parte, non abbiamo esempi di questo. Ecco perché credo che per quanto riguarda tutte le violazioni dei diritti delle libertà individuali della persona, in questo momento siamo più forti e possiamo naturalmente con la collaborazione di tutti gli Stati membri rendere questo uno strumento che rafforza la nostra identità. Poi abbiamo bisogno, mi permetta, di rafforzare la nostra presenza sulla scena globale. Noi ci dimentichiamo spesso di aree del mondo anche a noi vicine e poi quando ci sono le crisi ce ne accorgiamo perché magari ne veniamo travolti. No, dobbiamo essere un po' più lungimiranti. Lo spazio del Mediterraneo è casa nostra, dobbiamo occuparcene di più e nello stesso tempo dobbiamo occuparci anche di relazioni con i paesi dell'area del Mediterraneo che vediamo essere attratti da forme di autoritarismo che diventano anche molto pericolose. Credo che questo atteggiamento di dialogo, di confronto, di rafforzamento della nostra diplomazia sia necessario. E non possiamo pensare di rafforzare l'Unione senza inserirla nel contesto globale. Ecco perché la pandemia ci dà tante lezioni. Non mettiamole nel cassetto. Sarebbe un errore strategico, un errore per il nostro futuro. Non possiamo prendere le lezioni del Covid e metterle in un cassetto e pensare di tornare al mondo di prima, perché questo non avverrà. Già vediamo tante dinamiche muoversi. Se noi pensiamo di rimanere fermi, dobbiamo saperlo, gli altri si muoveranno molto più rapidamente di noi.
Thank you, Mr. President. We now go to Nina Kasimati for United Left, and may I request Mr. Dundee, Lord Dundee, to request for the floor after this. Nina, you have the floor.
President Sassoli, welcome to our Assembly on behalf of the Unified European Left as well. I believe we can all agree that the balance in the relationship between European Union and Turkey has now been obviously absent due to the deviations of the latter from the Council of Europe treaties, as well as due to its violations of international law and the European acquis, thus severely undermining not only the basic pillars of the Council of Europe, namely and EU, namely democracy, human rights and rule of law, but also the peace and stability in the southeastern Mediterranean and the Aegean Sea, which remain Europe's last frontier of democracy. Mr. President of the European Parliament, apart from the positive agenda rhetoric pertaining to the issue, will European Union, being unavoidably affected by the national foreign policy agenda and the omnipresent economic interests of certain powerful member states, will take concrete measures in order to redress the situation with Turkey? And if so, what is the time frame? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Lord Dundee, please request for the floor. Mr. President. You have the floor, sir. You have the floor, sir. President Sassoli, do you hear me? You have the floor.
Ah sì, no, pensavo ci fosse un'altra domanda, scusate. Ma sulla Turchia noi siamo stati molto chiari fin da subito. Ricordo che nella tornata di gennaio il Parlamento ha dichiarato molto chiaramente che per aprire una nuova pagina nelle relazioni con l'Unione Europea, la Turchia deve ritrovare un cammino che oggi ha smarrito. E il cammino è quello improntato ai valori democratici. Noi siamo stati molto chiari, naturalmente su questa lettura vogliamo essere anche conseguenti con tutti gli atti che, come sapete, arriveranno anche in Parlamento e che riguarderanno le relazioni tra Unione Europea e Turchia. Però questa domanda mi consente di fare anche un'altra osservazione. Noi non possiamo essere troppo distratti rispetto a quello che ci succede attorno. Lo ripeto, abbiamo bisogno di rafforzare la nostra politica estera. Naturalmente anche su questo i nostri Stati membri dovrebbero fare un po' di esame di coscienza, perché pensare di continuare ad andare ognuno per proprio conto e poi sostenere che l'Unione Europea non è in grado di assolvere a compiti di politica estera, questa diventa una contraddizione infantile. E penso che alcuni paesi in particolare dovrebbero riflettere, perché oggi abbiamo bisogno di politica estera dell'Unione Europea. Non può esserci la fuga di nessuno, non può esserci nessuna capacità da parte dei nostri Stati membri di supplire a questa necessità. Ecco perché questo è un periodo in cui dobbiamo ripensare ai poteri dell'Unione Europea per renderla più efficiente. D'altronde, quale cittadino della nostra Unione, di tutti e 27 i paesi, può essere innamorato di un sistema che non risponde con rapidità ed efficienza ai bisogni delle nostre opinioni pubbliche? Chi può essere innamorato di questo? Ma noi abbiamo purtroppo su tanti capitoli e su tante questioni un'Unione Europea che non ha competenze. Quanti anni che tanti cittadini chiedono una risposta europea sui temi dell'immigrazione e invece l'Unione Europea può fare solo supplenza. Credo che questo sia un tema fondamentale, perché se non avremo naturalmente le competenze per poter rispondere con rapidità, naturalmente i nostri cittadini penseranno che l'Unione Europea è soltanto un peso e non una grande opportunità.
Thank you. We will now head into 5 questions, Mr. Lord Dundee not being online. In order, there will be Joseph O'Reilly, Nicole Tris, Laura Castel, Andreas Nick, and Zita Gurmai. May I really ask all 5 of you to be concise, because time is of the essence, and I know that we can steal a few minutes from the President of the European Parliament. So, let's head on with the first, Joseph O'Reilly, remote. Joseph, you have the floor. Please, as short as possible.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. President Sassoli, recent violence in Belfast highlights how the Good Friday Agreement, signed in 1998, succeeded in preserving peace, human rights, rule of law, and democracy. As Brexit poses a threat to the agreement, Ireland was initially to receive 1.02 billion of a 5.4 billion euro-wide Brexit adjustment fund. France has amended distribution, which would significantly reduce Ireland's share. Could you give a view on this? Could you also comment on the EU-wide Distinct Economic and Resilience Fund and its implementation? Thank you, President Sassoli.
Thank you. I know, Joseph, that the question was not really heard about. It is about the contribution of the European Union to Ireland, the 1 billion, and then the Resilience Fund. We go now to, maintenant on va à Nicole Tris qui est en salle. Nicole, si vous pouvez être le bref que possible. Nicole, vous avez la parole.
Oui, merci Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président du Parlement européen, la pandémie de coronavirus a représenté un défi majeur pour les institutions parlementaires en général. La plupart des parlements ont su trouver des solutions empiriques pour continuer à débattre et à émettre des votes sans mettre en péril la santé de leurs membres. L'Assemblée parlementaire du Conseil de l'Europe, sous l'impulsion de son président, que je remercie pour son implication personnelle, a mis en place des procédures innovantes et nous avons pu reprendre nos sessions ici, à Strasbourg, en format hybride depuis le mois de janvier dernier. Pour des raisons que je ne m'explique pas, Le Parlement européen ne s'est pas inscrit dans les pas de la PCE alors que les traités européens prévoient qu'il siège à Strasbourg. Ma question est donc la suivante, et j'y associe notamment les parlementaires alsaciens présents ici, comme Olivier Becht ou Claude Kern. Pourquoi le Parlement européen n'a-t-il pas été capable de faire ce que la PCE, pourtant dotée de moins de moyens, a été en mesure d'accomplir sans pour autant mettre en danger la santé et la sécurité de ses membres et de son personnel? Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Nicole. For your information, President, Nicole is the chair of the French delegation in our assembly. We now go to Laura Castel. Laura Castel, as short as possible, please. Laura.
Mr. President, good morning. Mr. Sassoli, and welcome to the Parliamentary Assembly, the place where to foster freedom of debate without censorship. But not in every country there is a freedom of debate in parliaments. I am talking about Spain. I am talking about the Parliament Board, which censors the investigation of monarchy corruption, which censors an important law such as the amnesty law. 2 weeks ago, a political solution for our political prisoners. I am also talking about courts telling Catalonia's parliament what they can or cannot debate about, destroying the separation of powers and free political debate. With all this in mind, from your position, being aware that you are now at the core of the Human Rights and Democracy Organization, would you censor democratic debate, Mr. Sassoli? Would you tolerate censorship at the European Parliament? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We very quickly are going to have Andreas Nick and then Zita. I know that the chair of the European Parliament is under pressure there, so please bite us. Andreas, very fast.
Herr Präsident, der Europarat hat eine hervorragende Rolle gespielt, insbesondere in den 90er Jahren, die jungen Demokratien Mittel- und Osteuropas an die Standards von Menschenrechten und Rechtsstaatlichkeit heranzuführen. Das war eine wichtige Grundlage für den Beitritt dieser Länder auch zur Europäischen Union. Heute stehen beide Organisationen vor der Herausforderung, dass Mitgliedstaaten, insbesondere deren Regierungen, sich von diesen Standards wieder zu entfernen suchen. Wo können wir dort die Kooperation intensivieren, was die Venedig-Kommission angeht, das Monitoring-Verfahren und den Rechtsstaatsmechanismus, über den die Europäische Union berät? Vielen Dank.
Thank you, Nick. Andreas, and quickly, Zita Gurmai online. Please have your question, allowing the President to at least give a start of answer. Zita, you have the floor. Please make it quick.
Cari Presidente, European institution, lovely to see you, should aim to bring European policies closer to European people. How can this happen when a tool of participatory democracy is not being used as its full potential? Recently, the development of a comprehensive regulatory framework for national minorities was delayed after the Commission rejected the Minority Safe Pack initiative, despite the wish of 1.2 million European citizens, the support of several governments, and the European Parliament as well. This is concerning for all of us in PACE, as the protection of national minorities is a priority in this Assembly. However, as a former colleague of yours, of the Parliament and rapporteur for the first regulation of ECI, my question is more overarching. So far, 76 ECIs were launched. 5 were answered, and none of them resulted in a legislative proposal. Do you believe that the legal framework needs amendment on the way the current rules are applied should be changed in order to enable citizens' initiative to fulfill the original purpose of mine and Alan's Lamassoure? So, Cari.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As long as you wish, but the floor is yours.
Io dovrei rispondere perché, Presidente, dovrei lasciarvi, ecco, ho un altro impegno e non vorrei ritardare. Noi ci siamo trovati un anno fa per rispondere alla domanda sulla questione dell'organizzazione del nostro Parlamento, con una grande difficoltà, come tutte le istituzioni, ma in particolare il Parlamento europeo in quanto organismo che funziona con 27 rappresentanze nazionali e che, come sapete, ha degli obblighi di trattato. Abbiamo lavorato con le autorità francesi passo passo e purtroppo non abbiamo potuto assolvere alla nostra funzione di svolgere le nostre plenarie a Strasburgo in questo periodo per dei problemi oggettivi che ad esempio riguardavano il trasferimento di diverse migliaia di persone dello staff del Parlamento e il loro ritorno nei paesi di residenza. Le autorità francesi conoscono molto bene le nostre difficoltà, hanno sempre avuto grande comprensione e soprattutto perché per noi tornare a Strasburgo è davvero importante. Noi vogliamo tornare a Strasburgo. Io pensavo già alla fine della scorsa estate di poter tornare nella nostra città, ma questo non è stato possibile per delle condizioni oggettive e anche sanitarie della regione del Basso Reno e della Ville de Strasburgo. Noi abbiamo degli obblighi, certo, ma in questo momento tutti sanno quanto sia importante difendere la salute e la salute anche dei membri del Parlamento e del nostro staff. Ma la collaborazione fra me in particolare per le responsabilità sull'emergenza sanitaria che mi derivano dal nostro regolamento e le autorità centrali e amministrative francesi è sempre stata molto stretta. E anzi voglio ringraziare la sindaca di Strasburgo con cui mi sono sentito l'ultima volta la scorsa settimana per fare il punto sulla situazione nella città di Strasburgo, che continua ad essere molto difficile. Ma noi speriamo naturalmente di tornare presto nella nostra città che, come dicevo in apertura del mio discorso, rappresenta bene la storia dell'Unione Europea. Per quanto riguarda le questioni delle minoranze, Zita Gurmai, io la saluto, ha lavorato per tanto tempo qui al Parlamento e ha lasciato un bel ricordo della sua passione e della sua competenza. Lei sa benissimo quanto il Parlamento europeo sia attento alle minoranze ogni volta che c'è la possibilità di rafforzare questo principio, spesso messo in discussione da tante politiche e da tanti atteggiamenti politici. In diversi paesi dell'Unione il Parlamento è sempre stato un portatore di richiami e di attenzione. Dobbiamo sempre accendere i riflettori sulle situazioni di difficoltà dei nostri cittadini. Le questioni delle minoranze sono per noi un punto fermo. Adesso naturalmente verificheremo, i gruppi politici si misureranno sugli emendamenti e sui testi che verranno presentati alla plenaria, ma sono convinto che dal Parlamento europeo non ci sarà nessun cedimento. Per quanto riguarda le questioni interne al dibattito spagnolo, voi sapete che noi ce ne siamo occupati anche come per alcune decisioni che la Corte ha assunto all'inizio della legislatura. Per noi ci sono delle regole, ci sono i trattati e ci sono naturalmente le valutazioni che i gruppi politici danno a queste vicende. Per quanto riguarda le questioni degli Stati membri, adesso non ricordo benissimo la domanda, però da quello che ho capito noi abbiamo bisogno in qualche modo di porre l'accento su tutto quello che può oggi essere utile ai nostri Stati, ma anche rafforzare la presenza e l'iniziativa dell'Unione. Questo è un tema fondamentale. Come possiamo pensare di uscire dal Covid e magari affrontare le nuove sfide che arriveranno, inevitabilmente arriveranno, se non aggiorniamo le nostre competenze, le competenze dell'Unione Europea in questo momento. Abbiamo visto in questo anno la stessa Unione comportarsi in due modi diversi. Questa è la lezione del Covid. Sulle questioni finanziarie, sul bilancio pluriannuale dell'Unione, sulle questioni dello Stato di diritto, noi sapevamo quali erano le nostre competenze ed è stato fatto un eccellente lavoro. Ma la stessa Europa, con le stesse persone, si è trovata in difficoltà sulle questioni dei vaccini. Perché? Perché non ne ha le competenze, perché ha fatto un'opera di supplenza meritoria e importante. Non ha potuto imporre anche agli Stati membri delle linee che fossero omogenee e uguali per tutti. Questa è la lezione del Covid. Ogni volta che l'Europa ha competenze risponde con efficienza, ogni volta che l'Europa fa opera di supplenza si trova in difficoltà. Prima mi era stata fatta una domanda rispetto al certificato vaccinale. Noi voteremo questo provvedimento nella prossima plenaria, adesso il 26-27 di aprile, miglioreremo il testo della Commissione. Non vogliamo che ci siano elementi di discriminazione per i nostri cittadini. Però naturalmente quello strumento è importante, perché se viene introdotto a giugno, quando già una parte dei nostri cittadini saranno vaccinati, noi potremmo riaprire con ordine. Potremmo pensare di riaprire molte attività con ordine e credo che quello sia uno strumento, naturalmente che non deve essere obbligatorio, ma può essere utile a riaperture ordinate di tanti settori. Pensate per esempio all'autotrasporto, alle questioni che si sono verificate in tutti questi mesi ai nostri confini, ai confini dei nostri paesi con le questioni dell'autotrasporto. Oggi quel certificato può consentire un passaggio ordinato. Ecco, credo che questo sia lo spirito con cui uno strumento come quello può in qualche modo mitigare le difficoltà in cui tutti si trovano. Però naturalmente non devono esserci discriminazioni e non devono esserci abusi e di questo noi ne siamo convinti e vigileremo e miglioreremo il testo della Commissione.
Thank you, Mr. President. I see
Grazie.
you've got a lot of passion. This is the same down here in Strasbourg. So I do hope that we can meet in the near future. I obviously hope, as you do, to be able to be here. I see in your answers that you really are a forceful defender of the European Union. May I inform you that we here, and I myself am a forceful defender of the Council of Europe. And as you say, we are natural partners. We should join forces. This is synergy, you know, 1 + 1 makes more than 2. So I do hope in the near future we can do so. Thank you very much. I've got more than 40 questions still on my list. So I don't suppose that'll be possible. But we will find some way to get these questions to you or in any other way to link up your parliament and our parliament in order to make life better of all of our citizens. Many, many thanks, and I really hope to see you very soon. Thank you, President Sassoli.
Molto bene, grazie.
And
Saluto
hope to
a
see you
tutti,
soon.
buon lavoro. Grazie. Grazie a voi.
Voilà. May I ask who is going to preside over the meeting now? Andreas, if you can come down, just 1 minute. Thank you all for being here. This was quite an important address by President Sassoli, and we will, without any doubt, take some of the elements, Madam Secretary General, in our work in the near future. Thank Andreas for taking over.
Everyone in their seats? We now come to the joint debate on two reports from the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy and the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights. The first is titled Urgent Need for Electoral Reform in Belarus, document 15253, presented by Lord David Blankasra. The second is titled Human Rights Violations in Belarus Require an International Investigation, document 15256, presented by Mrs. Alexandra Louis. In order to finish by 1 p.m., I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 12:30 p.m. to allow time for the replies and the vote. I call Lord Blankasra, Rapporteur, to present the first report. You have 7 minutes to present the report, and then we'll have a further 3 minutes to reply to the debate at the end. Lord Blankasra, the floor is yours.
Belarus have never met international standards of freedom and fairness. That is a sad fact with which we are familiar in this Assembly, as we have observed several elections in Belarus, the last one being the parliamentary elections in November 2019, when I had the privilege to chair the Assembly's election observation mission. Therefore, it came as no surprise when last August, in the aftermath of yet another election, which was neither free nor fair, the citizens of Belarus went into the streets to massively challenge the results and protest against the violation of their right to free and fair elections, amongst other things. So back in September 2019, when I initiated the motion, which is at the origin of the report which you have in front of you today, I had a very clear purpose in mind: to come up with a list of neutral Assembly recommendations on electoral law reform so that the elections in Belarus can meet the international standards of freedom and fairness, that the electoral system can become transparent, accountable, and ultimately credible, and that the Belarusian citizens can regain confidence in their own electoral process. So, Mr. President, today I am proud to present those recommendations to you, which are all based on the previous findings and conclusions of our own Assembly, the OSCE, the ODIHR, the Venice Commission, and Belarusian civil society. I would like to stress that in the preparation of my report, I have followed an inclusive approach. Thus, I've tried to reach out to all relevant stakeholders, including the Belarusian authorities. Regrettably, the authorities have never replied to the questionnaire which was sent to them and simply ignored my proposal to interact with them directly. Other stakeholders have responded positively, and I would like to thank them here, in particular, the civil society representatives who continue to work for a more democratic Belarus bravely and relentlessly. Throughout the process, I've been criticised with the same arguments over and over again: that the Assembly did not observe the presidential election last year, that Belarus is a sovereign state, what is more, it's not a member of the Council of Europe, and therefore our Assembly is not in a position to dictate anything to Belarus or its citizens. Now, what I say to those critics is simple. Yes, we have not observed the last election, but that was not our choice. We simply could not do so due to the lateness of the invitation and the sanitary situation related to COVID-19. But we have observed elections in Belarus over the last 20 years and have found the same failings every time. Yes, Belarus is a sovereign state and not a member of the Council of Europe, but does that make it less European, colleagues? Does this mean that the people of Belarus are less worthy of the values this organisation stands for, and that we should look away? Does this mean that this Assembly has no right to say what has been off the rails in Belarus? I say no, and more importantly, I say that it is neither our task nor our intention to dictate anything on Belarus or its citizens. Based on our expertise in electoral matters, we are simply offering our good services, and we're standing ready with practical and technical guidance to reform the electoral system should there be a request in this direction. Now, I said at the beginning that this report is making neutral recommendations. But let me be absolutely clear, though. Making neutral recommendations on electoral reform does not mean that this Assembly is neutral on the situation in Belarus, because we are not. We condemn, as does the draft resolution, presented to you the appalling abuses on human rights and the serious failings of the Belarus electoral system, which have persisted for more than 2 decades. And my colleague, Ms. Alexandra Louis, has much more to say about that, I am sure, in her report. We condemn, as does the draft resolution presented to you in my report, the August 2021 elections as being neither free nor fair. However, as the title clearly indicates, the remit of this report is the much and long-needed electoral reform in Belarus. Thus, my report is narrowly focused on electoral law changes which are necessary to set the basis for free and fair democratic elections in Belarus. And before I finish, I would like to address an issue that came up several times in the discussions in our committee. That is whether the emphasis on the report on the need, ideally, to have an electoral reform before new elections can take place would impede possible snap elections in the country. Now, I've given very careful consideration to this issue, and I've clearly recognized in my report that an electoral reform will take time, and the fact that it is needed should not be used by the authorities as an excuse for postponing elections indefinitely. Now, that being said, snap elections cannot take place at any cost. Thus, paragraph 6 of the draft resolution sets the minimum conditions to be respected for such elections to be deemed free and fair, should they take place. Mr. President, colleagues, I am confident that by following a non-divisive path and adopting neutral recommendations, as in this report, we may stand a better chance to sit at the table with the Belarusian authorities, whoever they may be in future, and discuss electoral reform, which is what my report is about. This and other changes to the legal framework are absolutely necessary and will pave the way for a new Belarus that is based on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Plenkasra. I now call for Mrs. Louis, rapporteur, to present the second report. You again have 7 minutes to present the report, and then we'll have a further 3 minutes to reply to the debate at the end.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, je voudrais tout d'abord souligner le travail de mon collègue qui vient de s'exprimer sur l'urgence d'une réforme électorale au Bélarus et le féliciter pour son travail. Chers collègues, nous avons tous suivi avec une grande attention le mouvement courageux de protestation et de résistance pacifique du peuple bélarusse, après l'élection présidentielle truquée au mois d'août dernier. Un mouvement de protestation dans lequel les femmes ont joué un rôle crucial, avec à leur tête la candidate d'opposition Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya. Et nous avons tous appris avec horreur que les forces de l'ordre, si on peut encore les appeler ainsi, ont commis des violences indicibles pour supprimer le mouvement populaire. Nous avons vu des images insoutenables de torture et de violence à l'encontre des manifestants pacifiques, dont des femmes, des jeunes, des personnes handicapées. Tout cela dans une totale impunité. C'est la raison pour laquelle l'Assemblée a décidé de préparer des propositions concrètes pour combattre l'impunité des tortionnaires et de leurs responsables hiérarchiques. Combattre l'impunité, c'est d'abord une question de principe, de justice universelle. Mais c'est aussi une arme de dissuasion. Nous devons envoyer un signal fort aux violeurs des droits humains, qu'ils sachent qu'ils devront répondre de leurs actes. Nous avons déjà vu que l'appareil judiciaire bélarusse est en l'état incapable ou empêché politiquement de faire la justice dans de tels cas. Il n'y a simplement pas de poursuite contre les agents d'État violents, même en cas de mort d'homme. Par contre, les médecins, les avocats, les défenseurs des droits humains, les journalistes qui s'emploient à documenter et à rendre publiques de telles exactions se trouvent poursuivis pénalement sur la base de lois particulièrement floues. La Commission de Venise a d'ailleurs adopté un avis à notre demande sur la compatibilité de certaines de ces lois pénales avec les principes européens en la matière. Sans surprise, elle a conclu que les lois sur la base desquelles sont poursuivis ces manifestants pacifiques et les leaders de l'opposition réunis dans le Conseil de coordination sont excessivement vagues. Nous devons reconnaître comme prisonniers politiques, selon la définition de ces termes dans notre résolution 1900 de 2012, toutes les personnes emprisonnées, pour avoir participé aux manifestations pacifiques ou pour avoir publié des informations sur ces manifestations et sur leur répression, ou encore pour avoir aidé les victimes de la répression en tant qu'avocats ou autres défenseurs des droits humains, et également les leaders de l'opposition démocratique. Leur libération doit être la première des priorités. Notre deuxième priorité doit être d'envoyer un signal fort contre l'impunité. Le projet de résolution de la Commission juridique fait des propositions concrètes et claires, notamment celle de soutenir l'initiative développée au sein du Parlement européen visant à créer une plateforme de coordination qui fédère les efforts au niveau international de lutte contre l'impunité au Bélarus, alors en recueillant et en analysant et évaluant les informations et les éléments de preuve pertinents. J'ai eu l'honneur d'y assister avec le président de la Commission des affaires juridiques, Boris Ilevich, que je remercie. Les informations ainsi recueillies et évaluées pourront alors être mises à disposition des autorités nationales à une double fin. Premièrement, pour les aider à faire usage de la compétence universelle des tribunaux nationaux, qui se heurtent encore trop souvent à des problèmes pratiques d'accès aux informations et surtout à des éléments de preuve. Deuxièmement, pour aider les États membres ainsi que l'Union européenne à imposer des sanctions ciblées, et c'est important, par exemple via les mécanismes Maginski déjà existants ou encore à créer. Comme vous pouvez le constater, les projets de résolution et de recommandations contiennent encore bien d'autres propositions et revendications adressées aux autorités du Bélarus, à nos propres gouvernements, mais également à l'Union européenne. Je voudrais terminer mon propos en ayant une pensée pour la jeunesse du Bélarus, car je pense qu'au sein de cette jeunesse, il y a les ferments justement d'un avènement de la démocratie au Bélarus. En tout cas, je vous tiens à vous remercier pour votre attention et je reste évidemment à votre disposition pour vos questions et commentaires.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Louis. I will now go through the list of speakers for the debate. First, the speakers on behalf of political groups. First speaker is Madame Ingjerd Schou from Norway for EPP.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. The EPP welcomes these two reports and comments the two rapporteurs on their excellent work. They show only too well what can happen when elections time and again are not free and fair. After the fraudulent elections in August last year, we have seen a Belarus in crisis. There has been an unprecedented wave of violence against political oppositions, human rights defenders, journalists, and ordinary citizens. The electoral system in Belarus is flawed. For more than 2 decades, the OSCE and ODIHR and the Venice Commission have pointed to problems in the electoral system. Their advice has not been heeded. President, comprehensive electoral reform is needed in Belarus, and today's electoral system is neither transparent, accountable, nor credible. For the Belarusian people, reform is needed for them to have confidence in the electoral process. An electoral reform, as proposed in the draft resolution, will aid the long-term stability of the country. It will also assist its rapprochement with the Council of Europe on the basis of the organization's values and principles. And President, the violence against peaceful protesters and human rights defenders, which we have witnessed again and again since the election, cannot be accepted. Those responsible have not been held to account. The reports of serious human rights violations, including torture, are numerous. We cannot stand by silently. The EPP supports the establishment of an international investigation and the international accountability platform for Belarus. We also support making the expertise of the Council of Europe available for this platform. The only way to reach a peaceful solution is through a genuine, inclusive dialogue between the authorities, the political opposition, and civil society. The aim must be new, free, and fair elections this year. Yet again, we urge the Belarusian authorities to end the violence and the use of force and to live up to its international commitments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Next speaker on the list is Monsieur Frédéric Petit from France for ALDE.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. 256, ça fait 256 jours que les Biélorusses se battent pour une nouvelle élection présidentielle, et cette fois une élection libre. Bien sûr, ils se battent pour leur nation, leur identité retrouvée, la fierté d'être Bélarus, d'être citoyen d'un pays qui est entre la Russie et l'Europe et qui doit s'inventer une place singulière et inédite dans le XXIe siècle. Mais plus que pour un programme, ils se battent depuis le début pour la vérité et pour la transparence. Ils sont descendus d'ailleurs dans la rue bien avant le 9 août, puisque les mensonges avaient commencé pendant la campagne avec l'arrestation des candidats les plus dangereux. Les coups de matraque, la torture, les humiliations, les viols, les conditions épouvantables des prisons, le coronavirus, rendent certes la mobilisation moins impressionnante que cet été ou que cet automne. Mais les Bélarusses créent des actions de contestation locales, une sorte d'autogestion de la contestation, les femmes en noir par exemple, et c'est bien la société civile bélarusse qui est en train de naître, en coordination étroite avec les équipes de Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, réfugiée à Vilnius, et de Pavel Latouchka, réfugié à Varsovie. Ces deux capitales ne sont pas un hasard. La Lituanie et la Pologne se montrent exemplaires dans le soutien à cette lutte. Ils accueillent les Bélarusses en exil, ils offrent aux étudiants bélarusses la possibilité de continuer leurs études, ils accueillent et financent les associations humanitaires et les médias indépendants bélarusses. Ces deux pays ont une légitimité dans la spécificité historique, culturelle, politique de cette région, de ce voisinage. Nous l'oublions parfois. Lorsque Svetlana Tikhanovskaya nous appelle, nous, Européens, à être plus courageux, elle pense aussi à ce dépassement des clivages et des divisions quand nous faisons face à l'essentiel. Aujourd'hui, le constat est clair. L'Europe ne fait pas assez pour le Bélarus, ou ce qu'elle fait n'est pas efficace. Malgré le trucage des urnes, Loukachenko est toujours là, ses fidèles aussi, et le nombre de prisonniers politiques augmente jour après jour, semaine après semaine, pour des raisons de plus en plus arbitraires, voire surréalistes. Nous devons désormais imaginer un soutien plus direct aux associations humanitaires qui accueillent les réfugiés politiques, aux médias indépendants, aux comités de citoyens. Nous pouvons et nous devons faire plus, cela urge. Le président russe Vladimir Poutine doit rencontrer demain Alexandre Loukachenko pour pouvoir utiliser le territoire bélarus dans sa stratégie de pression autour de l'Ukraine. Notre institution doit aussi pouvoir également être reçue sur place. Nous n'avons pas affaire à des enjeux tactiques, à des enjeux de circonstances, des marchandages, mais bien avec les enjeux fondamentaux du rapport entre chaque citoyen et son gouvernement, ce qui est à la racine de la convention qui nous rassemble ici, tous sans exception. Et cela dans un pays qui est le dernier à ne pas l'avoir signé. Comme l'a souligné le rapporteur en introduction, c'est bien notre affaire à tous ici présents, et l'oublier nous menacerait également tous, sans exception. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Next speaker is Mr. Arkadiusz Mularczyk from Poland on behalf of European Conservatives.
Thank you. In my speech, I would like to raise the problem of discrimination against the Polish minority in Belarus. Polish minority in Belarus are descendants of the Poles who become Belarusian citizens due to boundary changes that occurred after the World War II. The Union of Poles in Belarus, Związek Polaków na Białorusi, is an organization gathering the Polish minority in Belarus. Its activities focus on cultivating Polish culture and tradition, as well as supporting Polish education and Polish language learning. Since the 2020 presidential election in Belarus, the wave of repressions against representatives of civil society has highly increased. The Polish minority members intensified considerably. 5 active and prominent representatives of the Polish minority are being held in custody. In this number, Angelika Borys, charismatic chairwoman of the Union of Poles in Belarus. They are all being accused of incitement to hatred on the grounds of nationality or religion, and may be sentenced to 5 to 12 years of imprisonment. Other activities of the Polish minority are being repressed. Office of the Union and other organizations, as well as private apartments of representatives of the Polish minority, were searched. Polish teachers and students are being interrogated and intimidated. Public media in Belarus continue her defamation campaign against Poland and Polish people, which includes deterioration of historical facts regarding Polish action during the World War II. The Belarus is also bound by UN member states' obligation, among them in line with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Persons belonging to national minorities shall not be denied the right in community with their other members of the group to enjoy their own culture, to profess and practice their own religion, or to use their own language. And moreover, the bilateral 1992 Polish-Belarusian Treaty on Good Neighborhood and Friendly Cooperation sets out legal basics for protection of the Polish national minority, guaranteeing the right to freely maintain, develop, and express their ethnic, culture, linguistic and religious identity without any discrimination. I am calling for solidarity, condemnation of the action of the Belarusian regime towards the Polish minority. And I think in the current situation in Belarus requires not only a fruitful debate in the Assembly and adoption of relevant resolution on the issue, but also justifies addressing a written question from the peace based to the Committee of Ministers on its position toward the ongoing repression. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Tini Cox from the Netherlands for United Left.
Thank you, Mr. President. After the presidential elections on the 9th of August last year, massive protests broke out in the streets of Belarus, and we noticed a very harsh reaction of the authorities to these peaceful protests. The Parliamentary Assembly, by its standing committee, could already react very soon on what was happening there in Belarus, which is the only state in the territory of Europe which is not a member state of our Assembly, but nevertheless is in the midst of Europe. And in that standing committee, my group called to immediately to condemn all violence by the Council of Europe against these peaceful protesters, and to demand immediate release of political prisoners and a rapid consultation between the government and the opposition to organize new elections. And we offered the assistance of the Council of Europe to Belarus, to both the Belarusian authorities and the opposition. We are now almost 9 months later, Mr. President, and the situation is still most worrying. Instead of dialogue, we see ongoing confrontation. We see a continuation of the oppression. We see ongoing harassment of peaceful protesters, arrests of citizens, long sentences against people who participate in the protest, and there is no way that we can foresee new presidential elections as it is now. Today, the Assembly reacts with 2 reports in which we give proposals how to overcome the situation in Belarus, and we offer our best services. I thank our both rapporteurs, Alexandra Louise for her report on human rights violations and the need for an international investigation, and David Blanchatra for his report on how to organize free and fair elections at last in Belarus, and the need for an electoral reform. I'm very much in favor of what David Blanchatra said. We do not order Belarusian authorities nor Belarusian opposition to do anything. We propose them to do things, and we offer our help. I think the excellent report of Lord Blanchatra gives the authorities and the opposition in Belarus the possibility to start to have an electoral reform that in the end could indeed lead to free and fair elections. And the same goes for the report of Madame Louise. Free and fair elections, end of oppression of oppositions, free all political prisoners, and international investigation. These are clear proposals of this Assembly, and I hope that we will support them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last speaker on behalf of political groups is Mr. Fouad Benchika from Belgium on behalf of Socialists, Greens and Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, dear members of the Assembly. In Belarus, the protest broke out on 9th of August following the national elections. The protests continue until the end of the year. LGBTI people and activists have participated and supported the protest from the beginning. Some brought rainbow flags to the protest to be visible and to make a statement about their existence and participation and steps towards democracy. I'm gravely concerned by the increased reports of mass detention, intimidation and torture, including sexual violence. Statements from LGBTI people and their allies in Belarus highlights the torture and the ill treatment against participants in the peaceful protests have become commonplace in detention centers. But LGBTI detainees suffer greater violence and abuse due to the prevalence of anti-LGBTI hatred among law enforcement. These violations are coupled with impunity stemming from the authorities' unwillingness to conduct effective criminal investigation into allegations of torture, and lawyers are being denied full access to their clients in detention. Conditions of detention are inhuman. Detained people have no access to food, water, and personal hygiene products, and 20 to 50 people were put in 4- and 8-person cell. LGBTI activists warned that even if Lukashenko resigned, their fight would be far from over, as they live in constant fear of harassment, violence, and physical abuse by state and non-state actors. Persecution and fear are the lived reality of the majority of LGBTI people in Belarus due to the lack of protection of their fundamental right by the state and stigmatization among society. In a context of widespread LGBTI phobia and discrimination, Belarus provides no protection to LGBTI people, equality and safety. Law enforcement and judiciary are often overlooked bias-motivated crimes against LGBTI people. Moreover, police themselves engage in discrimination and harassment, intimidation, and gross violation of rights towards LGBTI people. In the light of this information, I reiterate that freedom of assembly is a universal human right which has been grossly violated by Belarusian government. It's vital to ensure the right to freedom to peaceful assembly and guarantee the protection to peaceful protest without limiting the rights of participants, including LGBTI people. It's vital that Belarus ensure that all prisoners of conscience in Belarus are released immediately and unconditionally, and that prompt, effective, and impartial investigation of the circumstances of their arbitrary arrest and all reported human rights violations of detainees are initiated. Belarus must condemn violations against LGBTI people by law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the list of speakers on behalf of the political groups. Next speaker is Lord Foulkes from the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much for the opportunity of saying a few words. And I want to speak in strong support of both reports and to thank the rapporteurs for doing an excellent job. I'm concerned particularly about the political prisoners and their conditions. First of all, I think we should make prisoners that have been arrested without good reason. I've got a list of the so-called reasons put forward by the authorities, and they're held in without mattresses, having to stand up, without exercise. It is really an inhumane conditions that they're suffering. And we should protest very strongly in every possible way against these conditions. But I want to make a very strong plea about individual action that members of parliament can take, and I know some in many countries have already taken it, and I have taken it here in the United Kingdom, and that is to adopt a prisoner. By agreeing to adopt a prisoner, you give that prisoner some hope, some encouragement. I have adopted Stepan Latipov, and I've been in touch with him. I've sent him messages, and I've heard back that gives him some hope, some encouragement. And I hope more of our colleagues in every country, every member country of the Council of Europe will do that. We'll build up, just as we build up pressure against this unfair detention, against the dreadful conditions that they're held in, we will also give hope individually to those prisoners. And I hope that plea will be picked up by members of this Parliamentary Assembly. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Popsoy from the Republic of Moldova.
Honourable colleagues, there is no discussion that Belarus is a European country, that Belarusian people are European people, that they appreciate democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and they crave all these fundamental freedoms just as much as any of us do and any of our fellow citizens. Unfortunately, these fundamental freedoms are being denied to them every day. And equally unfortunately, there is very little international reaction that would change this reality. In Eastern Europe, there are many issues with fundamental freedoms, and Eastern Partnership countries have struggled a great deal. Yet Belarus, to great regret, stands out in the worst possible case. I would like to express solidarity with the people of Belarus first and foremost, and to call upon each and every one of us and our member states to do more to help the people of Belarus. Because in the 21st century, in the heart of Europe, people should not be denied their fundamental, very basic democratic freedoms that are at the core of this organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Brenner from Hungary. No, you have to use the other system because of the online. Yeah.
Dankeschön für das Wort, Herr Präsident. Zuerst möchte ich beiden Rapporteuren gratulieren zu diesen beiden sehr mutigen Berichten, wie ich meine. Und ich schließe mich meinen Vorrednern auch an, dass wir uns sehr solidarisch mit den Bürgerinnen und Bürgern von Belarus hier in dieser parlamentarischen Versammlung zeigen müssen. Als Vizepräsident vom ungarischen Parlament und Mitglied des Ausschusses für Auswärtige Angelegenheiten hatte ich im letzten August eine Sondersitzung initiiert, damit wir gerade diese Solidarität und diese Unterstützung für die Bürgerinnen und Bürger von Belarus dann unterstreichen. Im Namen von der größten Oppositionspartei meiner Volkspartei Jobbik habe ich das mit einem Text auch untermauern wollen. Ich meine, dass für eine wohl und gut funktionierende bürgerliche Demokratie freie und faire Wahlen eine wichtige Grundlage sind. Gerade aus einem Land wie Ungarn kommend möchte ich das besonders betonen, da wir ja im nächsten Jahr auch Parlamentswahlen haben werden und faire Wahlen werden das auch wieder nicht sein, wie das schon 2018 der OSZE-Bericht über die Wahlen in Ungarn festgestellt hat. Noch einmal möchte ich betonen, dass es ist in Europa, wo wir für gemeinsame Werte stehen und gerade hier im Europarat Menschenrechte und bürgerliche Rechte wichtig, dass wir uns immer solidarisch zeigen, wenn es Länder gibt, wo autoritäre Anführer eben all diese Werte missachten und untergraben. Ich meine, dass die Staatengemeinschaft aufgefordert werden sollte, wie das auch hier gemacht wird in diesen Berichten, hier eindeutig Stellung zu nehmen. Und natürlich gibt es immer geopolitische Überlegungen. Niemand soll hier in dieser Versammlung so naiv sein, das zu missachten, aber gerade der Europarat sollte weiterhin für die grundsätzlichen Werte der bürgerlichen Demokratie, für die Menschenrechte und gerade für die Rechte von diesen Bürgerinnen und Bürgern von Belarus dann aufstehen, die nichts anderes gemacht haben, als friedlich demonstriert und eine anscheinend nicht freie Wahl kritisiert haben. Das ist sehr, sehr wichtig, dass wir uns alle solidarisch zeigen. Deswegen möchte ich noch einmal diese beiden Berichte begrüßen und unterstützen. Herzlichen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.
Vielen Dank, Herr Brenner. Next speaker is Monsieur Hubron from France. He's not in his allocated seat. I'm not sure whether he's anywhere else in the chamber or online. If that's not the case, I will give the floor to the next speaker, which is Mr. Goncharenko from Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank rapporteurs for a brilliant work. It's really two brilliant reports, and today we can really adopt powerful, mightful resolution. What's going on in Belarus now? We have an usurper and dictator, Lukashenko, which is killing his own people. More than 30,000 people were put in jail. Hundreds of political prisoners just now, right now. Belarus now is like a concentration camp inside Europe. What he is doing with people and with human rights there is absolutely awful. I want to share with you a story of one lady, Ekaterina Andreeva, who is a journalist, and she prepared the book Belarusian Donbass. And we published this book in Ukraine, and that's why I know her personally. And she was sentenced for 2 years in prison. You know for what? Just for streaming from protest meeting. Just for streaming as a journalist, for her journalist work, nothing else. She even was not taking part in it. She was just streaming, and 2 years for this bright lady. And it's absolutely awful what's going on there. Why it is possible? Because Lukashenko now is on two pillars. First is brutal violence from law enforcement forces, but they are now not law enforcement forces, they are private army of Lukashenko. And secondly, by Putin, by help of Russian Federation. Tomorrow Lukashenko will fly again to Putin, and that's two pillars which make possible this awful regime to be on place here in the center of Europe. And I think that in our resolution, we are putting absolutely clear steps what should be done. A roadmap to free, democratic Belarus, how it should be. That is, first, stop the violence, stop political repressions, and we are addressing to all the governments to make any cooperation with Belarus and Belarus authorities conditional to stopping of the violence and freedom of political prisoners. Secondly, change of electoral system. Thirdly, new democratic elections, and not somewhere in future, but this year. And after this, we will see absolutely different Belarus. By the way, language is important, not Belarusia, not Belarusian people, Belarus, Belarusian people, and they have their right to be part of European family. That's very important. And I'm sure that the first thing that will be done by democratic Belarus is to join our organization, to become a member state of the Council of Europe, because it's the only country, European nation, which now is not inside our organization. And that's why it's very important to support this. That's why we need to do it. That's why we need to say that Lukashenko is not president, but tyrann, and we cannot have any cooperation with him. And that resolution answered all these questions clearly and powerfully. So it's very good. And in the end, I want to address to Belarusian people. Братья, мы с вами за вашу и нашу свободу. Живе Беларусь!
Thank you. Next speaker on the list is Lord Griffiths from the United Kingdom. Online.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and allow me with others to thank Lord Rencathra and Madam Alexandra Louis for their reports. The spirit, as well as the letter of each of those reports, is to be honored. The Council of Europe strives not only to be critical of wrongdoing, which is of course proper, but also to offer a way through to better days. And the spirit of these reports is so admirable. I, like my dear friend Lord Fawkes, have adopted a prisoner in Belarus. He is just 17 years of age, though 16 when he was arrested in August last year, a young man named Mikita Zalataru. He has been held without trial. He has been sentenced subsequently in a trial to 5 years imprisonment. He has epilepsy. He's unwell. He has problems with himself, but he is a fine young man, and it is distraught parents who tell the tale of his life. It was in Homel in southeast Belarus, just a week after the disturbances there on the 10th, that he was arrested. I can't believe that a country that can hold its head high in the international community can descend to the kinds of treatment that they've inflicted upon this young child. A lack of independence of the judiciary, a failure to protect children, a deprivation of liberty, a being held in solitary confinement. The conditions which Lord Fawkes referred to are conditions that he has survived in. Lack of access to a lawyer, no responsible adult to be with him at crucial moments in all of this. His appeal comes up in 2 days' time. He is in detention and solitary confinement. The case has been rigged against him. And I think that the voice of Mikita Zalataru should ring loud and clear to all the peoples represented in this assembly and even beyond, that Belarus must change and take advantage, perhaps, of possibilities put before it by the two reports that we're considering in this morning's debates.
Thank you. Next speaker on the list is Mrs. Andrikiene from Lithuania.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, I would like to thank both rapporteurs, Lord David Blancastra and Madam Alexandra Louis, for very comprehensive and well-balanced reports and recommendations as adopted by the Political Affairs and Legal Affairs Committees of PACE respectively. Thank you very much, dear rapporteurs, for taking on board my amendments tabled individually and also with a group of colleagues for today's plenary. A few remarks regarding the context of adoption of these two important reports and current developments in Belarus. As we know, a political crisis is unfolding in Belarus as the result of the falsified election last August. Ms. Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya, the leader of the Democratic Forces of Belarus, has proposed dialogue with representatives of the regime as a peaceful way to solve the current crisis and avoid its escalation. Despite fear and intimidation, almost 800,000 citizens of Belarus voiced their support to this proposal through an online platform. In response to this suggestion, the regime of Lukashenko accused Ms. Tsikhanovskaya and 16 other leaders and activists of the democratic forces of terrorism. I think our position should be clear. It is one more attempt to silence democratic opposition in the country and a pure provocation by Lukashenko's regime, because Ms. Tsikhanovskaya cannot and will not be considered a terrorist under the international law. No way. Our mission, as I understand it, is to encourage a dialogue between the authorities and the opposition as the only way to cease the violence, human rights violations, and to hold new democratic elections to resolve the political crisis. Tomorrow Lukashenko is going to Moscow to meet President Putin. Let us see if not the sovereignty of Belarus will be sacrificed tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker on the list is Monsieur Frides from Switzerland.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice-président, Mesdames, Messieurs, chers collègues. Je dois vous dire que je n'ai pas vraiment été surpris des réactions populaires de l'été dernier après les élections présidentielles remportées haut la main par le président Loukachenko. Je vais vous raconter une histoire. En novembre 2019, je me suis rendu à Minsk avec la délégation pour observation des élections législatives et voilà, j'ai constaté des choses intéressantes. Tout était calme, très calme. J'ai assisté cependant à des élections particulières, en fait des élections sans électeurs visibles. Le système prévoit par exemple un vote anticipé pendant 4 jours je crois. Mais personne dans et devant ces bureaux de vote, selon les ONG, et j'ai pu moi-même rester un moment devant un de ces bureaux, personne ne venait. Mais bonne nouvelle quand même, le dimanche jour du scrutin, lors de l'ouverture des bureaux de vote, on nous annonçait déjà une participation d'environ 30 à 40%. Cherchez l'erreur. Le vote débute, pas de votants. Allons, disons peut-être une personne par-ci par-là. Nous partons avec notre chauffeur et notre interprète dans la campagne vers l'est du pays, et là, presque toujours le même scénario. On arrive dans des villages avec des bureaux de vote qui sont vides ou presque, mais autour des bureaux, il y a de l'animation, des manifestations qui sont organisées pour attirer les foules, des films pour les enfants, des jeux pour les enfants, une vente de nourriture à prix cassé, mais chaque fois, personne ou presque. Dans les bureaux, l'accueil est en règle générale excellent, sous réserve de ne pas trop poser de questions. On ressent des assesseurs assez tendus et suspicieux. Si on insiste trop, il y a un téléphone qui est décroché pour appeler je ne sais qui. On nous offre des gâteaux, du thé, des groupes de danse folklorique animent l'ambiance. En fin de journée, on arrive en fait dans le lieu où on va observer le dépouillement. C'est à Minsk, un dépouillement rapide, opaque, réalisé par des fonctionnaires qui transgressent sans problème quelques règles du code électoral. Et les résultats tombent, un succès écrasant des soutiens du président, avec une très excellente participation. Chers collègues, il y avait bien un miracle en Biélorussie, un pouvoir plébiscité par des électeurs fantômes. Alors en août 2020, 80% des voix pour le président Loukachenko, 10% pour son opposante, c'est une belle plaisanterie. Le peuple dans la rue, par son nombre et sa détermination, a rendu le vrai résultat du vote. Les tricheurs ont été trop gourmands et pris la main dans le sac. Oui, Lord Benkafra, le Bélarus et ses habitants méritent un vrai et juste processus électoral. Voilà mon témoignage, je n'en dirai pas plus. J'espère sincèrement le meilleur pour ce pays idéalement son entrée prochaine au Conseil de l'Europe et enfin le respect des droits de l'homme et l'instauration d'une vraie démocratie au Bélarus.
Merci. Next speaker is Mr. Zingaris from Lithuania. Emanuelis, have you requested for the floor? Okay.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Nick. Thank you, Andreas, for wonderful chairmanship and on this most terrible question that in the middle of Europe we started to have a Soviet-type concentration camp. It's Gulag established by Mr. Lukashenko under auspices of President Putin. And tomorrow they will go to speak how to strip part of independence, part of statehood of Belarus. Now in this house was yesterday announced by Chancellor Merkel like a consciousness of Europe. That means Council of Europe, a parliamentary assembly. We should at least clean us from those guys who are coming to represent Belarus from so-called parliament. Parliament of Belarusian Republic is not a parliament, is a part of dictatorial executive machine to repress Belarusian people. So remembering Christos Pourgourides' report, if you remember 10 years ago, it was non-report about situation exactly about situation in Belarus, who become twice worse like during the rapporteurship of Mr. Pourgourides. The parliament we just mentioned, so-called parliament of Belarus, just adopting the framework, who is a terrorist in Belarus. Terrorists become President-elect Madame Tikhanovskaya. Terrorists are every political prisoner from 400 and terrorists are from the press who just put it to jail two 22-year Belsat journalists. Terrorists are 400 political prisoners again, and lawyers, advocates. So lawyers are the law about, they're now banning private lawyer companies inside of Belarus, and they will be establishing from now only state lawyers who will be so-called defending political opponents. That means they will be on the side of prosecutor office. It's absolutely clear that the last law established against lawyers in Belarus not to represent by private offices, but present only by state, means it's last point in creating the Gulag in the middle of Europe. And I would like to say that we should strip us from this so-called pleasure to see those guys in our parliamentary assembly. I would like to just to ask not to meet them again while they're representing Lukashenko regime, members of so-called parliament. I would like to say again that I would like to ask you to support amendments to this report. Amendments by Goncharenko and by Lema Andrikenia, and that will be good if we will be telling Живе Belarus, amendments and two reports. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Mr. Fabrichny from Russia. I'm not sure he's connected. He's not connected. So I will give the floor to the next speaker, Madame Tris from France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La Biélorussie n'est pas membre du Conseil de l'Europe, mais nous ne pouvons pas rester indifférents et passifs devant les violations massives des droits de l'homme et de l'état de droit perpétrées par le régime de ce pays, plus particulièrement depuis le 9 août 2020. Les deux rapports dont nous débattons ici, et dont je salue la qualité et la portée, sont à mon sens étroitement liés. L'un, celui d'Alexandra Louis, dresse à la fois un constat accablant des violences, arrestations arbitraires, tortures et pressions politique contre les aspirations de la société civile biélorusse. L'autre, celui de Lord Blanquatra, esquisse les conditions juridiques pour une sortie de crise durable et l'espoir, à terme, de voir la Biélorussie au sein du Conseil de l'Europe. L'origine de la crise est politique et électorale, politique indiscutablement, parce que le peuple biélorusse n'en peut plus de ce régime autoritaire, corrompu et inefficace qui est là depuis 1994. Électorale, forcément, parce que le régime s'appuie sur des règles obsolètes et contraires aux standards internationaux en matière d'élection. Tout ce que souhaite ce régime en place, qui est illégitime, c'est de rester coûte que coûte au pouvoir. Le scrutin du 9 août 2020 a été marqué par de très graves irrégularités. Le peuple biélorusse ne s'y est pas trompé, lui qui a massivement bravé des semaines et des mois durant les persécutions du pouvoir et des forces de sécurité pour manifester pacifiquement. Ce courage qui a conduit à des milliers d'arrestations et d'emprisonnements arbitraires, à plus de 500 cas de torture recensés, à des décès, à des milliers de plaintes restées sans suite, force notre respect et nous oblige. Il nous oblige, oui, il faut aider ce peuple qui ne demande que des élections libres et démocratiques. Cela suppose de pouvoir recourir à la compétence juridictionnelle universelle. Il faut envoyer un signal fort envers les bourreaux du régime qui doivent être poursuivis et sanctionnés. En outre, les instances internationales telles que l'Union européenne devraient pouvoir agir à l'encontre des autorités biélorusses via des mesures économiques renforcées. Enfin, la Biélorussie doit pouvoir sortir de ce cauchemar en refondant ses institutions et son système électoral. Et à cet égard, nous, ici, nous nous devons de les aider, de les accompagner, avec nos moyens, nos outils, nos conventions et nos valeurs. Chers collègues, la société civile biélorusse nous regarde et espère, encore, malgré tout. Ne les décevons pas, agissons, condamnons les actes et les exactions intolérables d'un régime sclérosé et illégitime. Je voterai sans réserve la résolution et la recommandation qui nous sont proposées ce matin. Merci aux deux rapporteurs pour ce travail fondamental.
Merci, Madame Tries. Next speaker on the list is Mr. John Howell from the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to begin by giving my warmest congratulations to both rapporteurs who have produced excellent reports on this. A number of people have said that Belarus is not, of course, a member of the Council of Europe. And if it were a member of the Council of Europe, in the face of these elections, it would be chucked out because this is not an acceptable way of behaving. Nobody could have sat there after the elections and watched the mass protests with a hard heart and not sided with those protesting. And as we have heard, many of those protesters have been arrested and some have been tortured. And many of those who were arrested on trumped-up crime charges have been given long jail sentences to carry these through. So there are a huge number of human rights problems in Belarus, a huge number that have to be solved, not with the help of the European Court of Human Rights, but through their own efforts. And I would draw your attention to Lord Fuchs's request that the people adopt a Belarusian protester and to provide them with the comfort that having that link provides. But we must above all bring to book those that have been committing these human rights violations. Now, elections in Belarus have never met international standards, certainly as far as freedom and fairness have concerned. So it shouldn't cause us any surprise that these last elections didn't meet those standards either. And I think it is right for us to make our opinion known, even though Belarus is not a member of this council. It is absolutely right that we make our criticism absolutely plain in these circumstances. And what we are after is an election system that doesn't simply say that what our request is about trying to stitch one up on Russia. This has nothing to do with Russia at all. It's to do with Belarus itself and the integrity and independence of the electoral system in Belarus. And I think that where we stand on that is an important marker for the sort of council that we wish to be, and for the sort of values that we wish to see adopted right across Europe, and indeed at the very heart of Europe, which is what Belarus is. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Madame Petra Bayer from Austria.
Danke, Herr Vorsitzender. Viktor Baruschka ist ein politischer Gefangener aus Belarus, für den ich die Patenschaft übernommen habe, so wie das schon auch Vorredner von mir für andere politische Gefangene getan haben. Viktor ist 32 Jahre alt, ein Geschäftsmann, und er ist am 18. Oktober 2020 nach einer Demonstration an einem Sonntag am Nachhauseweg von der Polizei verhaftet worden, wie er von der Polizei davongelaufen ist. Er wurde nach seiner Festnahme geschlagen, misshandelt, unter anderem mit einem Schlagstock vergewaltigt, und musste nachher 12 Tage auf der Intensivstation verbringen. Er, Viktor, wird beschuldigt, absichtliche schwere Körperverletzung begangen zu haben an einer Person in Ausübung einer offiziellen Funktion. Am 27. Jänner ist Viktor zu 5 Jahren in einer Strafkolonie verurteilt worden, und beim Berufungsprozess am 6. April, wo auch die österreichische Botschafterin dankenswerterweise anwesend war, ist dieses Urteil bestätigt worden. Viktor ist einer von Hunderten politischen Gefangenen in Belarus, und ich zoll all diesen unglaublich tapferen Frauen und Männern meinen allergrößten Respekt, weil sie trotz des Wissens über ihre persönlichen Gefahren, über ihre persönliche Antastbarkeit weiterhin für Demokratie und für wirklich freie Wahlen demonstrieren. Viktor und allen anderen politischen Gefangenen und allen, die weiterhin für ihre Grundrechte demonstrieren, alle jene verdienen nicht nur unseren vollen Respekt, sondern auch wirklich unsere Unterstützung politisch, bilateral wie auch multilateral. Eine unabhängige Untersuchung ist unumgänglich, aufzuklären, wie Polizei und wie Strafverfolgungsbehörden umgehen in Belarus, wie sie Menschenrechte verletzen, aber auch eine Änderung im Umgang der Behörden mit Menschen, die für ihre Rechte, die für freie Wahlen, die für Demokratie demonstrieren, ist genauso eine Voraussetzung für einen Dialog wie ein Wahlsystem, das es wirklich möglich macht, den Menschen in Belarus ihren politischen Willen unverfälscht zum Ausdruck zu bringen. Und ich denke mir, wir sollten wirklich das auch als Voraussetzung nehmen. Und ich möchte mich auch bei beiden Berichterstatterinnen für diese ausgezeichneten Berichte bedanken und hoffe sehr, dass es auch wirklich eine Grundlage dafür sein kann, dass wir mit Belarus in einen Dialog treten können, dass es vor allem zu Verbesserungen der Menschenrechtssituation kommt. Und herzlichen Dank für Ihre Arbeit.
Vielen Dank. Next speaker on my list would be Mrs. Martinez Ferro from Spain, but she's not in the seat allocated. Is she in the room elsewhere or online? That doesn't seem to be the case. Then the next speaker on my list is Mr. Scott Sims, observer from Canada. Mr. Sims, can you request for the floor again so we can connect you?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I hope you can hear me. From way across the ocean, it's always an honor to speak in front of the Council in this particular assembly for several reasons. I've been doing it for quite some time, and I've always been impressed with two very important things. Number one, I want to congratulate the rapporteurs for their very good report on this, very comprehensive and illustrative. Speaking of which, I also want to thank some of my colleagues here who've spoken before me, who bring some vital reflection to this debate by illustrating some of the people involved in this situation. Political prisoners, people oppressed in Belarus, and Belarusians that are going through this right now who want a much better world than what they're experiencing currently. And I want to thank them, in particular, Ms. Baer, who just spoke, also Lord Fowkes, who talked about adopting protester prisoners. I want to congratulate him and others who have done the same. In Canada, we take great deal of pride in what we call Elections Canada. It is our agency that is separate to governance. It is separate. It runs onto its own. It is answerable to our Parliament, but it certainly runs in its own place to make sure that we have fair and equal elections. Many of the hallmarks that have been illustrated throughout this report, recommendations by this Assembly, by the OSCE and the Venice Commission, bring some vital aspects to basic tenets of our democracy. Things such as maintaining a national voters list, the ballots and the printing of the ballots and the independence of the counting of elections, whether they be at a federal level or a subnational level. We take pride in making sure that all these are followed intensely. So one of these things that were said in the report, and I want to illustrate, is rapid and essential changes without the full legislative process can only be an interim solution. This is a small step to a great change that has to happen in Belarus, where free and competitive elections have not yet become the normal practice, has been illustrated many times. You know, in Canada, very soon, we're looking at legislation to combat disinformation amongst the public through social media. And when I think about this, a lot of it pales in comparison when I see the examples from Belarus regarding arbitrary detention of political opponents, human rights defenders, journalists, media workers, election workers. It's astounding for someone like me who grew up in a situation, as many of you have, with an independent election system. The goal of reintegration of Belarus into this assembly may seem so far off, but is something that for me, even as an observer from Canada, is going to be a long and patient process, but it's well worth striving for. Thank you to the Assembly for this moment.
Thank you. Next speaker on the list would be Mr. Artus Kaimins from Latvia, but he is not connected online as far as I see. No. Then I would give the floor to Mr. Kimmo Kiljunen from Finland.
Mr. President, thanks very much. My first words, grateful. I'm very, very grateful for both Lord Belarus as well as for Madam Mrs. Alexander Louise for these reports, what they have made. Very crucial, important items, human rights situation in Belarus as well as the situation of election reform needs. The Assembly has chosen a path to write first these two reports concerning the past as the present situation, and fair enough, the reports are very important, and thanks very much also for useful discussion what we have conducted here. There will be the third report, which I am actually rapporteur on inclusive national political process in Belarus. That report will not be a document itself, it's more about processes. Our approach is really speaking national processes, so we are not looking at it as an East-West confrontational way, but in terms of confrontation between past and present, past and future in Belarus. It's also inclusive in the way exactly expressed here. We are not only speaking about the country, but with the country. We try to have a dialogue with all relevant political stakeholders in Belarusian society. So that's the next step for our work. I have one problem on these reports, and it relates to Alexander Louis' report on human rights. There is an important paragraph number 8, and you mentioned about impunity platform should be created. True. But there's also amendment on that one made by Mr. Koncharenko. If the amendment which tells that there is a need to create also to create a permanent group on human rights issues by the Assembly, I think it's a bit awkward from the point of view that we try to create this inclusive process itself. If the question about that amendment is about impunity, I can see it. But if it's creating a parallel structure, permanent structure, which is more demonstrative in this format as it's made there, it doesn't help our process of creating this inclusive national process in Belarus. That's my not favor for that amendment. But with this interpretation, it's an impunity case, I can understand it. But in this format, I'm against it. I don't particularly like it. But I am very much in favor for Mr. Koncharenko's words saying that the ultimate aim for all of us is Belarus will become a full member of Council of Europe. That's obvious is the aim, and that would mean absolutely electoral reforms and human rights respect, as we have now stipulated in our report. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next speaker on the list is Madame Borjana Aberg from Sweden.
Thank you, Mr. President, dear colleagues. Thank you, Lord Blencathra and Madame Louise for their excellent reports. What currently is happening in Belarus is beyond horrific. For decades, a constant of Lukashenko's dictatorship has been crimes against human rights, but now the situation is extremely concerning. The number of political prisoners has passed 350. What is taking place is unprecedented in the history of modern Belarus. People are being arrested for no reason, or refused contact with lawyers and are imprisoned. In the prison, prisoners sleep on the floor and the cells are so cramped there is barely enough air. The guards pour bleach on the floor to cause severe nausea among the prisoners, leaving them nearly unable to breathe or see. It's unbelievable that this torture is happening in Europe today. The price of protesting against the regime is extremely high. Women who demonstrate threatened with the social services taking over care of their children. And during the spring session, the Belarusian parliament prepares new severely repressive laws aimed at intimidating people from resuming protest against the regime. Among others, there is a law about extremism that would make it easier for the authorities to declare people and organizations as extremists. There is also a media law that would forbid media from reporting about non-permitted demonstration and enable easier withdrawal of journalist accreditations. Additionally, a law that would allow employers to fire employees participating in demonstrations. All of this is for Lukashenko to build a facade of control after last autumn's chaos. What is occurring in Belarus shows that the imposed sanctions are not working. Belarusian people need and deserve all support in the fight for human rights, democracy, and justice. As Alex Bielitsky said, if we want to prevent Belarus from turning into a huge Gulag concentration camp, we need to actively support the Belarusian people today.
Thank you. Next speaker on the list is Monsieur André Gatulin from France.
Oui, merci Monsieur le Président, mes chers collègues. Le Bélarus fait tache, et il fait tristement tache sur la carte de l'Europe. C'est en effet, et cela a été rappelé, le seul pays qui n'est pas signataire de la Convention européenne des droits de l'homme, donc qui ne fait pas partie du Conseil de l'Europe. C'est également le seul pays qui n'a toujours pas aboli la peine de mort. C'est un pays, et les deux rapports qui ont été présentés, et je tiens à féliciter particulièrement le Lord David Benkatra et ma collègue Alexandra Lui, sont tout à fait exemplaires dans la manière de démontrer les trucages électoraux, mais aussi les exactions qui sont produits par ce régime. Je rajouterai à cela, pas plus tard qu'hier, l'ONG Reporters sans frontières vient de publier son classement de la liberté de la presse dans le monde. Le Bélarus recule encore et se situe au 158e rang sur 180 pays. C'est le pire des rangs européens. Alors, on le sait, ce pays est dirigé depuis 1994 par un seul et même homme, M. Alexandre Loukachenko. Et ce n'est malheureusement pas la première fois que notre instance, notre Assemblée, se penche sur les pratiques inadmissibles qui ont cours dans ce pays pour étouffer l'opposition démocratique. Déjà, en 2004, notre excellent ex-collègue chypriote, M. Christos Pourgourides, avait, à la suite d'une enquête extrêmement approfondie et qui fait référence en la matière, publié un excellent rapport sur les disparitions forcées au Bélarus. Je regrette d'ailleurs qu'il ne soit pas fait mention dans les textes, mais il y a tellement malheureusement de références négatives. Il se trouve que je suis pour cette Assemblée rapporteur sur les disparitions forcées au sein du périmètre du Conseil de l'Europe et que depuis 2 ans, je travaille régulièrement avec Christos sur ces questions parce qu'il continue l'enquête et la Deutsche Welle, d'ailleurs, il y a 1 an et demi, a fait un excellent reportage sur les suites à donner. Son rapport avait mis en lumière le rôle de M. Dimitri Pachinenko, ancien chef d'une unité spéciale de la police, accusé de conduire un escadron de la mort qui a fait enlever et exécuter 4 opposants politiques à M. Loukachenko. Il semblerait, au vu des manifestations en août et septembre dernier, que cet homme-là, qui avait un peu disparu, soit réapparu et pour stigmatiser des forces obscures contre les militants. Il y a des cas de disparition forcée temporaires qui ont eu lieu. Je crois que c'est le rôle, et ça a été déjà le cas de notre Assemblée, d'ailleurs de rappeler à tous ses membres, à tous ses pays membres, de signer et de ratifier la Convention internationale contre les disparitions forcées, parce que c'est aussi de cette manière que nous imposerons aussi des règles communes de liberté, de droit. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Next speaker on the list is Lord Russell from the United Kingdom.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes. I congratulate the 2 rapporteurs on 2 excellent and uncomfortably timely reports. I previously spoke on Belarus during our January 2020 session, a coronavirus lifetime ago, debate on the progress report on the November 2019 parliamentary elections. The PACE monitoring mission was headed by Lord Blencathra, and I had the privilege of being one of its members. That progress report informs and echoes the first of the 2 reports we're discussing today. I totally agree with and support all of the points made in paragraph 5 of the draft resolution. We saw almost all of these activities with our own eyes. But as paragraph 115 of the explanatory memorandum points out, we've been making the same points about the election system in Belarus for over 20 years. Is today any different? As one reflects on the travesty of the presidential election last year, the brutal cynicism of the systematic, escalating, silencing, terrorizing, and demonizing of anyone deemed to be an opponent, one is forcefully reminded of George Orwell's insightful comment on totalitarian regimes in his masterwork, Animal Farm. This is one of the 7 commandments to the Animal Farm pigs. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. How can one attempt to influence such a regime? I fear that we're moving rapidly back into an era of saber-rattling realpolitik, epitomized by a combination of brute physical force and of vainglorious and largely empty rhetoric. It seems that Belarus cannot be influenced alone. We must also influence Russia. No mean task, as most of us are painfully aware. There are no easy solutions, but we must do what we can. Like my colleagues Lord Foulkes and Lord Griffiths, I have adopted a victim of the regime's intolerance and arrogance. Ruslan Akostka was arrested for the crime of carrying a red and white flag, and he was then sentenced to 3 years in a penal colony for a false allegation of assaulting a police officer. Ruslan and all of his fellow prisoners deserve our support. It may only seem a little, but if a lot of us each do a little, the mathematics ultimately will allow us to prevail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is now 12:30 p.m. and I must now interrupt the list of speakers. The speeches of members on the speakers list who have been present physically or remotely during the debate but have not been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official report, provided that speakers connected remotely can report their actual presence when the debate is closed. I remind colleagues that typewritten texts must be submitted electronically no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. I now call Lord Blancastra to reply. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I'm grateful to everyone who has spoken in this excellent debate, and I particularly welcome the comments, the unanimous comments from members on my report. I wish to thank Ms. Hsu from Norway, Mr. Tini Cox, Lord Foulkes, Mr. Brenner from Hungary, Mr. Goncharenko, Lord Griffiths from the United Kingdom, Ms. Andrekien from Lithuania, Monsieur Frides from Switzerland, Madame Tries from France, Mr. John Howell, United Kingdom, Ms. Bayer from Austria, Mr. Sims from Canada, Ms. Abert from Sweden, Monsieur Gattelin from France, Lord Russell of the United Kingdom, and he speaks with authority, having been on the electoral mission with me in 2019. And of course, I also thank Mr. Kiljunen from Finland, and I also look forward to reading his report in due course. Now, we have had no criticisms today, but let me just denounce for the last time, and I hope never to say so again, we've often been accused of dictating to Belarus. We are doing no such thing. We've been asked by the Belarus authorities to observe their elections. It is therefore legitimate to make suggestions on how those elections can be improved. And I believe my report presents a neutral menu of essential election law changes if Belarus is to have a free and fair election system recognised by all Western democracies as meeting international standards. It is then up to Belarus to deal with our recommendations. So, colleagues, let's be clear what we're calling for here. It's not something extraordinary, but it's the norm for all free and fair elections as recognised by international standards. Now, what are they? So what we're saying to Belarus is remove obstacles to political parties and candidates registering. Stop candidates being registered or deregistered for often minor technical clerical reasons. Let's have effective controls on mobile ballot boxes. Let's have a properly balanced Central Election Commission and all the lower election commissions under it. Let's have a central public register of electors so that we can make sure that names are not being added again and again. Let us reform the ballot counting so that it is transparent, with observers permitted to observe properly and fully, and the results declared publicly. Let's have no involvement of state institutions, of employees of state institutions in the electoral processes, and have them openly campaigning for pro-government candidates. That's not right. And let's ensure that there is balanced media coverage for all parties and candidates. Colleagues, that is not rocket science. It's not some concept of an absolutely theoretical, perfect electoral system, which the world has never seen before. It's just the norm in all Western democracies which aspire to international electoral norms. Therefore, colleagues, I commend my report for the agreement of this august assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the chairperson of the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy wish to speak? Jolt, you have 3 minutes.
First of all, I would like to express my full solidarity with the democracy movement on behalf of our committee. And secondly, I would like to express my absolute solidarity with our Polish colleague, Mr. Mularczyk, who asked us to condemn the anti-minority intimidation against the Polish minority in Belarus. And I would like to call on all Council of Europe institutions and instruments to follow very closely the situation of the Polish minority in Belarus and to put into motion the instruments that the Council of Europe is having in this regard. On behalf of the committee, I would like to focus and congratulate on the work of our rapporteur, Lord Blanchatra, who has done a remarkable job in identifying the most pressing issues requiring change in the Belarusian electoral system and in presenting a set of recommendations to address them, based on 20 years of work on election observation, including by this very assembly. Despite being very relevant politically, electoral reform is essentially a highly technical issue. But this report is proof that even technical issues can be presented in a very inspiring way, as we could hear Mr. Blanchatra as well in live. But above all, I would like to commend the non-divisive path Lord Blanchatra has chosen. He did his utmost to protect the report from elements which may taint it with the accusation of bias. And he is not insisting on the neutral tone of his report for the sake of being neutral, but because he believes, and our committee follows him on that, that this is how we may stand a chance to sit and discuss electoral reform with the authorities in Belarus. I invite you all to support this approach. Yesterday, the Chancellor, Angela Merkel, has addressed this assembly and emphasized how important it was to maintain dialogue, sometimes against all odds. I sincerely hope that we all agree with that statement. And in that same spirit, the draft resolution, which is presented to you, calls for an inclusive national dialogue in Belarus to ensure a peaceful way out of the present crisis. Belarus people deserve peace and a country based on human rights, democracy, and rule of law. We should support this call, and we should support the rest of the recommendations in the two texts presented to you. And I believe that Belarus will be, in the end, the 48th member of our organization, and Europe will be fully reunited. Therefore, I invite you to vote in favor of the draft resolution and the recommendation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now call Madame Louis to reply. You have 3 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, je souhaite tout d'abord vous remercier pour vos propos très engagés, qui sont tout autant de messages très puissants à destination du peuple bélarusse, qui doit savoir qu'il n'est pas seul dans sa revendication des droits et des libertés fondamentales et dans son aspiration à la démocratie. Beaucoup de choses ont été dites, notamment sur ces violations des droits humains. Je pense évidemment aux actes de torture, aux détentions arbitraires qui ont été très bien décrites, mais également aux persécutions dont font l'objet malheureusement les minorités, quelles qu'elles soient, pour toujours des motifs très très flous. Il y a également ce sujet de la liberté de la presse, mais plus largement de la liberté d'expression, puisque au Bélarus, tout simplement se connecter à Internet est compliqué et souvent impossible. Ce qui nous paraît si simple à nous qui vivons dans le confort des démocraties, ce n'est pas possible pour les citoyens du Bélarus. Face à cette situation, mon rapport et celui de mon collègue proposent de donner des lignes directrices, des outils pour pouvoir sortir de cette impasse, parce qu'il est évidemment possible de sortir de cette impasse. le peuple bélarusse, comme nous, revendique cet universalisme de droit pour pouvoir justement aspirer à avoir des élections libres, mais aussi à pouvoir avoir un système judiciaire qui garantisse la liberté. Aujourd'hui, au Bélarus, les avocats, les journalistes aussi sont empêchés, le système judiciaire n'est pas en capacité de répondre, et bien pire, se fonde sur des textes particulièrement flous qui garantissent d'une certaine manière l'arbitraire. C'est la raison pour laquelle, dans mon rapport, il y a évidemment des mesures destinées aux États membres qui ont la possibilité d'agir, notamment par les mécanismes de compétences universelles, mais aussi avec ces fameuses lois Majinski. Mais également, je crois qu'il est important de dire les choses, de regarder la réalité en face et de les dénoncer. C'est notre devoir, nous sommes impartials, mais nous ne sommes pas tout à fait neutres. Je crois que la différence est importante. Nous devons dire les choses, nous devons être exigeants en matière de démocratie et d'état de droit. Et je crois que c'est d'ailleurs notre raison d'être dans cet hémicycle aujourd'hui. Je voudrais terminer mon propos évidemment en disant que la tâche est encore très grande pour parvenir à sortir le Bélarus de cette impasse, que le dialogue aujourd'hui est très compliqué, mais que je pense que c'est une piste qu'il faut continuer évidemment à explorer. Et je crois aussi, et je voudrais finir par là, qu'il faudra absolument lutter contre l'impunité. Partout en Europe, lorsqu'on laisse impunis des crimes, des délits, en tout cas des attaques aux droits humains, d'une certaine manière, c'est un message qu'on envoie partout dans le monde que ces crimes-là peuvent prospérer. Donc il est très important de les condamner verbalement, évidemment, mais également que les personnes qui sont responsables de ces faits, de manière individuelle ou de manière collective, puissent un jour répondre de leurs actes devant des juridictions nationales ou internationales. Je vous remercie encore, mes chers collègues, pour votre engagement sur le sujet du Bélarus.
Merci, Madame. Does the chairperson of the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights wish to speak? I think Boris Civic is online.
Thank you, President. Belarus is not a member state of the Council of Europe, but it is a part of Europe. And we cannot stay indifferent to gross and systematic human rights violations which occur there on a regular basis. Indeed, as many speakers in this debate said, we must strongly deplore what is going on in Belarus. But in my view, statements are not enough. We must ensure that all those who are personally guilty in these violations, all those perpetrators must be held to account. And the report by Madame Louis suggests the ways how this can be done. And this indeed must be done. We must work together in close coordination to develop synergy with the European Union, OSCE, and other international organizations. And I would like once again to draw attention to the coordination platform which has been established by the European Parliament, which has more resources to support local NGOs. The main goal is to document and to verify all allegations of human rights violations so that all member states and international organizations can act. I congratulate Madame Louis for her very serious work. I believe that this is really a very good report, and it really serves the main goal that no violation of human rights in Europe, whether within the territory of the Council of Europe or beyond it, no violation of human rights must go unpunished. So once again, I would like to thank Madame Louis for her excellent work, and I call upon all members of the Assembly to support this report and the draft resolution. Thank you, President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I declare the debate closed, and we come to the consideration of amendments. The Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy has presented a draft resolution in document 15253, to which 3 amendments have been tabled, and a draft recommendation to which no amendments have been tabled. The amendments will be taken in the order in which they appear in the compendium. I remind you that speeches on amendments are limited to 1 minute. We will start with consideration of the draft resolution, and then we will consider the draft recommendation. I call Mrs. Andrikiene to support Amendment 1. You have 1 minute. Is she around?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Amendment number 1 is on paragraph 6. And as you can see, what we proposed with 9 of us, 9 members of the Assembly, to replace the words which were in the original text, I quote, calling for caution as regards the holding of snap elections on the basis of the current electoral system. The Assembly, end of quotation, with the following words. The Assembly is aware of the calls from national and international actors for holding snap elections on the basis of the current electoral system, and as the rest is as in the text. I think it gives clarity because we really are aware of those calls, and we think that this should be mentioned in the draft resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against this amendment? Online? No one? Okay. What is the opinion of the committee? Committee is in favor. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. Members, sorry, I didn't ask the. Should I have asked the rapporteur? No. No, because Lord Pancasa was appearing here. Okay, I shall now put the amendment to the vote. Members present in the chamber should use the hemicycle voting system. Members participating remotely should use the remote voting system. The vote in the hemicycle and via remote voting is open. Sorry, the vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Uh, 77 in favor, 13 against, 16 abstentions. The amendment is agreed. I apologize to Lord Pancasa, who apparently wanted to speak against this amendment, but his request to speak only appeared on the screen already after I had received the response from the chairman of the committee. So maybe we need to make sure we speed up calling for the floor, because there seems to be a significant time delay. But I cannot keep this open for a minute or two when we proceed. I'm sorry. We come to amendment number 2. Again, call Mrs. Andrikiene to support amendment number 2. You have 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Amendment 2 is on paragraph 9 of the draft resolution. And in this paragraph, we have the following text. The Assembly calls on the Belarusian authorities and all relevant stakeholders to urgently initiate a broad-based and inclusive national dialogue to ensure a peaceful way out of the current crisis and opening the door for necessary reforms benefiting all Belarusian citizens. So what we proposed with other colleagues, the group of colleagues, that clarification of this part, all relevant stakeholders, adding after those words the following. including all opposition representatives and civil society. Please support.
Thank you. I understand Lord Blancastra now wants to speak against this amendment. Is this right?
It's just to say I'm not opposed to the amendment. I wasn't opposed to the last one. I thought as the rapporteur I could add my comment to say I was in favour of the last amendment. I'm in favour of this amendment. I always intended that all relevant stakeholders would include the opposition and civil society. This amendment makes it absolutely clear that all relevant stakeholders do include these relevant groups. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. What is the opinion of the committee?
We are in favour.
Thank you. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. Members in the chamber use the hemicycle system. Members participating remotely should vote using the remote voting system. The vote is now open. I declare the vote closed and call for the result to be displayed. (95 in favor, 11 against, 14 abstentions). The amendment number 2 is agreed to. We come to amendment number 3, and I call again Mrs. Antekiene to support amendment number 3. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Amendment number 3 is again on the same paragraph 9, and it's only a proposal to replace one word, which is initiate, with the word conduct. And then the text will look like as follows, I quote, "The Assembly calls on Belarusian authorities and all relevant stakeholders, including all opposition representatives and civil society, to urgently conduct a broad-based and inclusive national dialogue," and so on. Please support.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? I think we have 4 or 5 requests to speak online, which makes it a bit difficult. We can only accept one speaker against. Is anyone clarifying what they want to speak about? Maybe he's the rapporteur if he wants to. Okay, Mr. Zingeris wants to speak against the amendment. Emanuelis, 1 minute.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to support. It was a mistake, technical mistake. I am on the side of Laima Andrikina. Thank you. Amendment.
Can I please ask that when we ask for people who want to speak against an amendment, that only those call for the floor who want to do this, because this is confusing. We have still 3 requests to speak, and we do not know where to allocate them.
Mr. Ozali from Turkey is still online.
I have a request to speak from Mr. Ozali from Turkey.
Sorry, Andreas, for that.
He's not even around. Okay. He's not in his chair. Another technical mistake. I think I'll give the floor to Lord Prenkasra, who is the rapporteur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sorry if I have caused confusion by seeking to speak as the rapporteur. I just wanted to make it clear that I'm in favour of this amendment. I am always impressed when colleagues from other countries who do not have English as a first language pick a better word in English than I do. So I'm very happy here to change the word initiate to conduct, and I recommend acceptance.
Thank you. What is the opinion of the committee, Scholt?
We are in favour.
Sorry, thank you. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. Again, members in the chamber, please use the hemicycle voting system. Members remotely should use the remote system. The vote is now open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. (100 in favor, 13 against, 12 abstentions). The amendment is agreed to. We will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15253 as amended. Members present in the chamber, please use the voting system here. Members remote, please use the remote voting system. I declare the vote open. I declare the vote closed and call for the result to be displayed. (103 in favor, 16 against, 14 abstentions). The draft resolution in document 15253 as amended is adopted. Congratulations to the rapporteur. We will now proceed to vote on the draft recommendation contained in document 15253. I remind you that a two-thirds majority is required. Members present in the chamber and remotely use please your respective systems. I declare the vote open. I declare the vote closed and ask for the result to be displayed. (103 in favor, 16 against, 14 abstentions). The draft recommendation in document 15253 is adopted. Congratulations again to the rapporteur. I have a request on the floor from Mr. Sadov, which is, I think, not the right point in time, but it may be a point of order. Mr. Sadov? Okay. May I ask for a bit more diligence when asking for the floor, but it confuses the proper unfolding of the deliberations. The Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights has presented a draft resolution document 15256 to which 3 amendments have been tabled and a draft recommendation to which no amendments have been tabled. The amendments will be taken in the order in which they appear in the compendium. I remind you that speeches on amendments are limited to 1 minute. We will start with consideration of the draft resolutions and then we will consider the draft recommendation. Amendment number 1, for that we have an oral sub-amendment. I call on Mr. Goncharenko to support amendment number 1. You have 1 minute. Wrong system.
Yes.
Wrong system.
No, this system. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear colleagues, that's a very important amendment. I raised this issue in January during the address of Mr. Maas, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany, to our Assembly, that we need such body, permanent body, which will look after human rights situation in, first of all, human rights situation in Belarus and on the situation in Belarus. He, in his answer, he supported it. After this, I spoke with Madam Secretary General Maria Pecinovich-Buric. She also supported it, and I hope that after adoption of this resolution and recommendation, and I want to ask and to put it to the protocol of our meeting, to go forward and immediately to do it, because the situation is so awful. Thousands of people in Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, we need help them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I have been informed that the rapporteur, Madame Alexandra Louis, wishes to propose an oral sub-amendment as follows. In Amendment 1, replace the words Council of Europe Permanent Group or similar institution on the situation in Belarus, primarily on the protection of human rights, with the following words: an ad hoc working group within the Council of Europe tasked with monitoring the human rights situation in Belarus and contributing to the aforementioned Belarus Accountability Platform. In my opinion, the oral sub-amendment meets the criteria of Rule 34(7)(a). Is there any objection to the oral sub-amendment being debated? This objection, there is no objection here, there is no objection online. As fewer than 10 members object to the sub-amendment, I call Madame Louis to support her oral sub-amendment. 1 minute.
Oui, merci Monsieur le Président. Vous avez rappelé donc le verbatim de ce sous-amendement qui partage évidemment l'ambition du premier amendement, mais qui a pour but de préciser de façon très claire les contours de ce groupe de travail ad hoc afin de lui donner une pleine efficacité.
Merci. What is the opinion? Does anyone wish to speak against the oral sub-amendment? This does not seem to be the case. What is the opinion of the mover of the main amendment? Mr. Goncharenko, please.
I support it fully. Thank you.
Thank you. What is the opinion of the committee? Mr. Šivalić?
President, the committee supported the sub-amendment with large majority.
Thank you. I will now put oral sub-amendment 1 to the vote. Members, please use your respective voting system. The vote in both systems is now open. Thank you. I declare the vote closed and ask for the result to be displayed. "96 in favor, 20 against, 13 abstentions. The oral supplement number 1 is agreed to. We will now consider the main amendment as amended. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? This does not seem to be the case. What is the opinion of the committee?
The committee is in favor with large majority.
Thank you. Members should use their respective voting systems in the hemicycle or remotely. I declare the vote open. Thank you. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. "94 in favor, 20 against, 12 abstentions. The amendment number 1 as amended is agreed to. We come to amendment number 2. I call for Mr. Goncharenko to support amendment number 2. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. That's also very important amendment because what is our roadmap to tackle the situation in Belarus? First, certainly to stop political repression. Second, change the rules of elections because with these rules it's impossible. And thirdly, to have these new democratic elections. But when? Not somewhere in the future, but this year. Because from August of last year, Belarus doesn't have legitimate power because Lukashenko is not legitimate president. He is usurper. And that's clear for everybody. So it's very important to have new democratic elections as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? What is the opinion of the rapporteur?
The committee is in favor with large majority.
Thank you. So the committee accepted the amendment. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. Members, please use your respective voting systems. I declare the vote open. Thank you. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. "96 in favor, 21 against, 12 abstentions. The amendment number 2 is agreed to. We come to amendment number 3, and I call for Mr. Goncharenko to support amendment number 3. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. It's also important because we are in addressing to European Union, we already have in recommendation the point that all cooperation with Belarus authorities should be conditional on stopping of political repressions and making political prisoners free. But in the point about member states, we for the moment don't have it. So I think we need to put it and to make all connections with Belarus authorities, all cooperation, political, economical, financial, conditional to what is happening there with human rights and stopping of political repressions and making political prisoners free. Because in other case, they will just die. That's so important to do it. And I ask all of you for support. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? No one here. Anyone online? What is the view of the committee?
The committee is in favor with large majority.
Thank you. I shall now put the amendment to the vote on both respective voting systems. The vote is now open. Thank you. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. "95 in favor, 20 against, 14 abstentions. Amendment number 3 is agreed to. We will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15256 as amended. Again, use your respective voting systems. The vote on both systems is now open. Thank you. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. "102 in favor, 23 against, 13 abstentions. The draft resolution in document 15256 as amended is adopted. Congratulations to the rapporteur. We will now proceed to the vote on the draft recommendation, also contained in document 15256. Again, members, please use your respective voting systems. The vote is open. Thank you. The vote is closed, and I call for the result to be displayed. "98 in favor, 22 against, 13 abstentions. The draft recommendation in document 15256 is adopted. And I also congratulate the rapporteur on this success. The Assembly will hold its next public sitting this afternoon at 4 p.m. with the agenda which was approved on Monday morning. Thank you. The sitting is adjourned.